Week 3 underway on a Friday night. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Appreciate y'all being here to talk to me about college football. You make it all work. You make it all happen. Best discussion, debate, and analysis because of you and your contribution, your participation. We have left the live call-in link in the chat. We've left it on Twitter. It's even in the description section. When I leave it in the description section, you know I'm geared up for tonight. I even remembered to leave the call-in link in the description section of the video. It's there. It's up there all night. So there we go. 3 games on this Friday night. First and foremost, we had Maryland and Virginia. If you've been watching this week, you know that I'm hyped up about 6 games between the Big Ten and the ACC. Yeah, it would be nice if it was Clemson, Michigan, Florida State, Ohio State, Penn State, Pitt, Penn State, whoever, North Carolina. That would be nice. But we went mid-tier, low-tier in the Big Ten, mid-tier, low-tier in the ACC. And game 1 went Virginia's way to start. But for a second consecutive week, Maryland was down 14-0 to the Cavaliers. They were down 14-0 to Charlotte. No problem. Come back and defeat Charlotte by 18. Just scored 42 consecutive points against Virginia. At one point, the Virginia starting quarterback, Anthony Caliandra, had quite the hat trick, throwing 3 consecutive interceptions, 3 passes, 3 picks. Not what you want to do as a quarterback. He was mighty upset, had the talking to on the sideline, not the kick in the rear, what are you doing talking to, but the, hey, it's you'll live for another day. It's fine. Let's learn from it, because he was beating himself up. And Maryland beat up Virginia as expected, 14-point favorite again. They spot the Cavaliers 14. They win 42-14. The Terps are 3-0. Does that mean much? Means they're a lot better than the 3 teams that they played, just like the previous 2 seasons. So this is a 3rd consecutive season that Maryland is 3-0. And they finished 7-6 and 8-5. So that's probably the team that they are, but they will not be able to spot teams in the Big Ten not named Indiana, Rutgers, 14-0 leads and survive. Appreciate y'all being here. We will take these calls in just a second. Also want to make note that I will have a fun interaction with our buddy Corey Bratta here at some point, whether that's later tonight or probably on Tuesday. By the time he's got a busy Saturday, of course, covering Iowa football. I've got a busy Saturday in front of me covering college football. It takes me probably 45 minutes just to write out the lineup. 18 post games. That doesn't even include the instant analysis that I will do tomorrow. My aim, this is my goal. I do not promise this in any way, but after the nice response from our instant analysis, really for the last 5 years, this has been one of the more favorite things that you all respond to, are the instant analysis videos that we do on Saturday. Last week we did Nebraska, Colorado, and we did Miami, Texas A&M. I believe that was the other one. Yes. And so the response is always good for those. So what we would like to do is watch 2 games at noon, deliver instant analysis. Watch 2 games at 3:30, instant analysis. This might be a stretch, but watch 2 games in primetime, deliver the instant analysis before we come on live for the post-game show, call-in wrap-up show that we deliver about 11:30 p.m. Eastern time. If you're not aware, every Saturday night, this is your place to be. But I wanted to note, because Corey was making a big deal because Utah State scored 1 million points against Idaho State last weekend. And, of course, Utah State played Iowa, and Iowa put up the impressive number of 24 points against Utah State. And Corey was saying, hey, this Utah State team, I think they're serious. They won 11 games 2 years ago, which in college football is like ancient history. But 2 years ago, they won 11 games. And 7-6 last year. And this Utah State team is serious. And so I think that Iowa score is meaningful, that they even won the game by 10 points. And I'm like, shoot, are you kidding me? Big Ten favorite in the Western Division, winning by 10 points against Utah State. Well, Air Force, without breaking a sweat at this point, had 39 points with 25 minutes left in the game. 39 points playing just 35 of 60 minutes of football compared to the 24 that Iowa put up. And we also had Army and Texas San Antonio. Army was 5 for 5 on fourth down in this game. They were unstoppable running the football as they typically are. Last I checked, 37-29, late fourth quarter. I'll double check on that score. Let's go to the phone lines. Appreciate everybody being here. I should probably post our Air Force helmet. Where is it? I've not received any helmets for a year. That's not your fault. We have suspended helmet acquisition. We'll get back to that at some point when we set up the new studio in 2039. All right. That's Navy. We'll find Air Force. Let's give Air Force some time. I think they've been on the bottom shelf for a long, long time, and they're going to be 3-0, and they just wiped out Utah State. Up 25, about 10 minutes left. We've got Mike Ford on the line. Mike, what's going on?
Hey, Mark, how you doing?
I am doing well. Good to hear from you.
Thanks. And actually, the main reason I called in was I just got a new computer, and I want to make sure that I set everything up so that I turned my camera off, and I want to make sure I could be heard. And
I'm sure that was your main concern and priority when you bought the new computer was, can I get through to Mark? Sure that was at the top of the list.
It's higher up than you might think.
Well, I appreciate that, Mike.
Hey, I got to pester all you guys with my limited sports knowledge.
Oh, come on.
Well, I actually want to do a quick shout out for our coach Juwan Howard. He looks like he's recovering well. He had a little bit of a heart procedure done, and looks like he's on the mend right now. So I wanted to bring that up.
Glad that you did. Thank you. I didn't know, was not aware.
Well, I mean, it's basketball. I don't know how much you follow basketball, being the voice of college football.
We're caring of humanity here. So regardless.
I appreciate that. I was really worried about Maryland there for a while. I mean, I just didn't understand because this Virginia team, I don't want to rank, where they are, but I mean, I would say at best the worst, bottom 5 of the Power 5.
Yeah, if we started listing Power 5 teams and wanted to get to Virginia, we would want to start from the bottom and not the top, because we wouldn't be around for more than 13 seconds before we got to Virginia. Yeah, they're one of the worst, if not the worst. And I never doubted that Maryland was going to win that game. But yeah, it went through my mind at 14-0. Okay, well, Maryland's not one of these airtight. There's no way that they could kind of lose. Like if it was Michigan out there, there's no comparison there. Like that you just have all this faith in the world that Maryland could never get upset like that. Because it was only a 14-point spread too.
I mean, well, just the fact that, when you're home against, like I said, arguably one of the worst Power 5s. Yeah, this is a game that you should be able to roll your helmets out in the field and win. So,
and they eventually did, but it took a while.
And I gotta say, it wasn't because Maryland played great. I mean, they did play good, but Virginia made so many mistakes, which is typical of an 0-2 team. I mean,
yeah, they did. They did. And again, their quarterback threw 3 consecutive interceptions, and they were all really bad passes, bad decisions, obvious underthrows, bad decisions. And it was still 21-14 at half. So it took Maryland some time to pull away. I think the thing that really jump-started them, and I'm being Captain Obvious, but when in that situation, Virginia, road dog, haven't won a game, you go up 14-0, you got all that adrenaline, all that juice, you got momentum, and you're waiting to maybe go out there on defense, get another stop. When you give up the kickoff return for a touchdown after you just scored to make it 14-0, that just kind of negates and erases that last score, obviously, from a scoring standpoint, just takes your air out of your wings.
And it was something because for a good quarter and a half, I mean, Maryland's offense just looked like missing in action.
Yeah.
I was impressed that, Henry eventually turned it up a little bit, because I figured, for all the talk that, Tua gets, Maryland's ground game is going to have to step up for them to really compete with the other teams not named Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State. Because I'm sorry, what was it?
Yeah, they want balance. They are going to be a throwing team. There's no doubt about that. But Roman Hemby's been a 1,000-yard rusher and expected to be one again this year. And balance is always key.
He's got a good start going. I said most of this game was me trying to figure out, I don't think Maryland's offense is really a question. I mean, other than, can they get some more balance? It was, can their defense step up? Because I thought that Maryland could be a 9-3 team this year with the, the three obvious ones. But, I'm waiting to see if they can kind of get up to where they can kind of knock on Penn State's door to see if they can go for that bronze medal. I don't think they'll do it this year, especially now that Penn State looks like they've kind of stepped up to the Michigan, Ohio State level now. But I kind of felt bad for Maryland because they've been a solid fourth best, ever since Michigan State kind of took a back seat. And I'm waiting to see if Maryland can finally.
Meaning for 1 year. For one season, they've been number 4 in the East. But I get your point. It has that feel that it's more than just one season. But it is basically factually just one season, because Michigan State, of course, was 11-2 2 years ago. And actually, they ran 3 running backs tonight: Colby McDonald, Antoine Littlejohn, and Roman Hemby. They gave those carries 10, 9, and 9. And I wanted to look that up because when you said Hemby and I said Hemby, he was the main back last year, 1,000 yards. And I knew that they wanted to spread it out a little bit more and had other backs involved tonight and for the length of the season. So they're building depth. Loxley's done a nice job building this team, and they're stronger at the point of attack. They're not just a wide receiver defensive back team, but they're not at the standard of those other teams.
Well, I'm hoping it, like I said, the offense keeps going, because the main concern, I and probably a lot of other Michigan fans, that, with Josh Gaddis there, is, the offense going to regress a little bit, because it seems like Gaddis kind of has like the reverse Midas touch everywhere he goes.
Well, he did at Miami. And then that calls into question how much he really had to do with Michigan's success.
Well, I mean, if you ask any Michigan fan, the year he won the Broyles, he wasn't even the best coordinator on the team. Mike McDonald was 10 times the coordinator Gaddis was, and I don't think any Michigan fan that knows anything about the sport would argue that.
Yeah, I think sometimes when we award these awards, people are looking for who has emerged rather than who's the best. Who has emerged, who seems to be the up-and-comer, and he just kind of filled that spot.
I think he was just the popular pick at that time.
Yeah.
But so I'm looking forward to some games. I actually, like I said, I live on the Alabama-Florida border, and I graduated with my master's from Troy after I moved down after graduating Michigan. I thought about going to the Troy game because there's just no games tomorrow I really want to see.
It is a light slate. It's a thick slate. If you enjoy watching the 40th best teams in the country play each other, the 50th best teams, then tomorrow is your day. But yeah, there are no Texas-Alabama matchups.
I mean, honestly, I guess probably the most interesting game I want to see is, I guess, probably Georgia, South Carolina. And that's only to see, if Georgia is the team I think they are, I mean, they should just be able to call the score in South Carolina, because, I mean, whenever I saw North Carolina, whose defense was absolutely in the trash last year.
Yep.
What they get, was it 9 sacks and I think 16 tackles for loss on South Carolina? I mean,
yep.
This might be an all-time bad offensive line if you're allowing that from North Carolina.
One game, Mike, but I get your point. I'm not discounting that. but that's one game. And is Georgia's outcome tomorrow really going to change anybody's mind? Like unless they lose or unless they mightily struggle in this game. And then I think it just makes it kind of curious. If they struggle and win this game 27-23, I think it'll make a lot of people curious as to what's going to happen the rest of the year, and just thinking, well, are they going to arrive in the play or the SEC championship game and we're still not going to know how truly good they are, or did they just have an off week like every national championship team does? And since they're not going to necessarily be tested, although there is Tennessee on the schedule, I don't know that game's going to tell us as much as we would hope going into the season. If South Carolina is I don't want to say as bad, because I don't think they're a bad football team, but I just don't think that they're anything above a marginal bowl team. So Georgia, yeah, the 4 touchdown spread is what I would guess this to be the outcome.
Well, I mean, I'm kind of looking for if Georgia's that team. I mean, it looks like to me, but you also saw, because I know you put on the comment, was it yesterday or Wednesday, that I thought that Tennessee was going to take a step back. Because I'm seeing the SEC East right now, and I'm thinking this. I mean, for a couple of years there, the SEC East was looking legitimate. I don't see it this year.
I would not have pointed out your comment, Mike, if you would have said Tennessee's going to take a step back. Your comment had the term crappy in it somewhere. Something about Tennessee's the least crappy team on Georgia's schedule.
Yeah, of the SEC East not named Georgia, I said Tennessee was the least crappy.
Comparing these SEC schedules to these Big Ten schedules, the likes of, especially Michigan, since they don't play anyone non-conference and since they don't play anyone decent in the West, and that's not Michigan's fault, about the conference schedule.
I'm saying the non-con is.
And even the non-con, who knows what's working behind the scenes, because Ohio State canceled their Washington series just a couple months before Washington and Oregon joined the Pac or the Big Ten, and Michigan did the same thing. Well, they did that a few years ago. But anyway, aside, they're very top-heavy schedules. So Michigan has to play 2 extremely difficult games. And then, Georgia plays a lot of teams that I'm comfortable in saying are top 25 to 35 teams in the country. Ole Miss, South Carolina, Auburn, those types of teams. Florida, possibly. We'll see what they have tomorrow. They play a lot of those teams. In addition to Ole Miss. Yeah, Ole Miss, Auburn, Tennessee. Who's better than that? And South Carolina and Florida, Kentucky. They play a lot of those kind of teams. So they play a deeper schedule than if we were going to compare that to Michigan's schedule. They just don't run into 2 teams like Michigan does.
Yeah, and I think that's the reason why I put our schedule over Georgia's, because, we have to play Penn State and Ohio State. And I don't think there are 2 teams that Georgia plays that's on that level. I'd say you said Tennessee and Ole Miss is probably their 2 toughest ones.
I think people default to Ole Miss. I don't know why. I just think Lane Kiffin gets a little benefit of the doubt, but there's been nothing proven that says that Ole Miss is any better than South Carolina or Kentucky, or they certainly weren't last year. They were in that same group.
Well, I mean, I never can tell with Ole Miss, because it seems like for a few years now, Ole Miss, they always come out of the barn smoking. They'll go 5-0, 6-0, and then they start getting in the meat of their schedule when they got to start playing the Alabamas and the LSUs, and they just kind of go into free fall.
Well, they did last season. I don't know if that's true year to year, but they did last season.
I mean, I'm looking at Ole Miss now, because I mean, I like talking about running backs since we got 2 of the best, but that Judkins guy looks legit.
Oh yeah, He's a good one, and he was not highly recruited.
And I'm thinking Jackson Dart might have a chance to kind of elevate his name this year as well.
Oh, he's got the chance. Yeah, when you go out there and play Alabama, Georgia, LSU, those kind of teams, he will have the opportunity, and he's going to have to be better than he was last year. He wasn't bad last year, but he was just a guy, just a pretty marginal mid-level quarterback.
Yeah, since I don't think that Ole Miss has shored up their defense issues yet. I mean, these are not the land shark days. I think Dart, for them to be a double-digit, potential New Year's Six team, they might need a little bit more production out of Dart. But I think with the SEC West looking like it does, this might be their best chance.
That's a good call. It is probably your best chance for Ole Miss because the last time that there was not a dominant SEC West team, scratch your head, think back.
Probably the 20th century.
Yes.
I mean, you had, the Saban area, obviously, and then, LSU was
the
pretty
Saban
good
era
in the early 2000s.
Also
the Saban area.
Yeah. So there have always been typically multiple dominant top 5 to 10 teams in the country. This year, jury's still out, but the early indicators are nope. When the top 3 teams, the possible or probable top 3 teams in the division have already lost a game, and none of them looked good at doing it. Yeah. The SEC's taken a tumble this year, and they will have time in the postseason to correct that and change my mind at least. But they don't have enough games left against the other conferences in the regular season to prove that they're the best conference. They will not be the best conference in college football during the regular season. It's just if we're doing this analytically and logically and based on the results, that is an impossible conclusion to come to at this point. They just don't play enough games against the other conferences at this point to come to that conclusion. They've blown their opportunities.
Right. And I remember saying it before. It wasn't that they lost. It was how they lost because, LSU, Alabama, South Carolina, Florida, these were all double-digit losses out of conference.
Yep.
I mean, it'd be one thing if it, was a, game-winning field goal at the end or a, late touchdown drive, but all 4 of those teams, they were pretty thoroughly beaten. So that's kind of a black eye for the SEC that I don't think they're going to recover from.
So you're saying if Ole Miss just destroys Georgia Tech, Mike, that's not going to be enough for you to be convinced that the SEC's back?
Georgia Tech? No. Georgia Tech's already going to get a beating from an SEC team kind of late in the season.
Okay, Mike, anything else?
No, I don't think so. If you can hear me fine, that means my computer works.
Victory.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, Mark.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. We appreciate Mike being here. So we've got Michigan out of the way, got Notre Dame coming. We got the SEC coming / Kentucky. We've got Ohio State coming. Let's get to it at the Voice of College Football, reminding everyone that we'll be here at the same time tomorrow night, Saturday night. Wrap up your college football Saturday with us. Give me a call. Let's talk college football and review everything in the day. We want this to be the ultimate wrap-up show for the weekend in college football every Saturday night. And we appreciate you being here because we had about, I don't know how many strong going into like the 3 a.m. hour last week. Will's on the line. Will, what's going on?
Mark, I'm excited. My Irish can make history tomorrow.
Let me, is this going to be difficult for me to figure out? They can make history.
This will be the first time, if they do it, the first time the Irish have scored 40 or more points in their first 4 games since 1900. And they're mostly playing against high school teams back then. So it could be a history-making day in South Bend tomorrow against the Central Michigan Chippewas.
They've been playing high school teams this year. But that's
NC State's a Power 5 team.
Yeah, they did score the 40 whatever points, 42, 45. Okay.
But tomorrow, I mean, it's not the most eye-popping day of college football, but there will be some interesting games. We have Neil Brown's last stand in Morgantown against Pitt in the backyard brawl. I mean, I'm always excited for the backyard brawl, especially since both teams look. Pitt doesn't look as good as we thought, and West Virginia looks about how much we thought. So,
You know something we don't?
well, Joey Foster said that. Joey said he's gone if he loses.
If
But
there's anything going on in West Virginia, Joey knows.
yeah,
He knows everything concerning West Virginia.
yeah. Yeah, I called Joey about the game this week. Wanted to see his thoughts. So that's what he said. But
I think Joey is picking West Virginia to win, though.
yeah, of course. Yeah, it's Joey. So of course you pick West Virginia.
They're a favorite.
Yeah,
slightly.
This also could be Eli Drinkwitz's last season if things go south for Kansas. Not Kansas State, Missouri. They're playing Kansas State in Columbia. It's an interesting little game there.
It is. We went earlier today, and DeReal brought that up. He brought up Eli Drinkwitz, and I thought he was dead on with Eli Drinkwitz. And somebody else he brought up that I thought was a good selection for being, and noting that the last few years we have seen coaches shown the door after 3 or 4 games.
Mm-hmm.
Neil Brown, Eli Drinkwitz, somebody else was on that list.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they have similar talent, but Kansas State's just so much better coached.
Oh, they do have similar talent.
Yeah.
I believe that Kansas State's only a 4 or 4.5 point favorite, and it is on the road. And Kansas State does blow some games that they shouldn't.
In the beginning of the season.
Tulane last year.
Mm-hmm.
But I certainly have more confidence in Kansas State.
I do as well. I also, of course, have to pay attention to what LSU is doing, and they're playing the Land of the Cowbell at noon, and I'm surprised that they're that big of a favorite a little bit. But, I mean, watching the game last year between the two teams, I mean, Mississippi State came off to a hot start, but then LSU came back and kind of rolled through that game. But I think it could be more competitive than people think, especially because Mississippi State's supposed to become a run team, and they didn't do very well stopping the run against Florida State. So I feel like maybe they could have the Bulldogs could have some success running the ball.
This is what happens when you guys bring up games from last week, Missouri and Middle Tennessee. So then I look up the box score because I know nothing of what happened in that game besides Missouri just won by 4 points. Just to look that up, because that's not a good indicator of Missouri coming back and doing anything this year. That's for sure. Now, when it comes to LSU and Mississippi State, we'll say that Mississippi State, they didn't just kind of explode out of the box like Ole Miss did in Death Valley and then wilt. They had a lead in the fourth quarter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think 9.5 is a little healthy. Maybe that's tipping some people off to where I'm headed on that game, which reminds me I got to make picks when we get done here.
Mm-hmm. This could also be Tom Allen's last stand too. I mean, it's Louisville. I mean, it's a neutral site game, but I don't know if it'll be more IU fans or more Louisville fans there in Indianapolis and Lucas Oil. But I feel like this would be huge for Tom Brown to keep his job security if he could pull this off. And I mean, their defense looked pretty good against Ohio State. So
if there are more Louisville fans there than Indiana fans, of course it's close for Louisville, but still,
that would be bad. Yeah,
that's bad.
But I think it should be a pretty competitive game. I mean, it was a healthy spread, but I feel like maybe Indiana can play well and maybe be in the game at the end.
It's 10 points. I think this game falls under the game that we play from time to time to say, find your upsets. Where are the upsets tomorrow? And this is only a 10-point game. And every week we've got a batch of 8 or 10 or 15-point favorites that lose. So there are going to be more tomorrow.
Yeah, and Tennessee, Florida also. I mean, I feel like that spread's too low. I mean, I know Tennessee hasn't like.
I agree. I was surprised when I saw that spread.
I mean, Tennessee really hasn't proved anything yet, but Florida's proved that they haven't looked very good at all. And I mean, they beat a terrible FCS team in McNeese State, and they just looked horrible against Utah. I mean, there's nothing that excited me about that performance for the Gators. And I feel like that.
Yeah,
I'm
so
not
that's
going to
one
say
game.
Tennessee is going to name the score, but I feel like they should win by 3 scores.
Yeah, you might be a little bit more confident than I am, but I would side toward Tennessee. 3 scores on the road in the swamp, pretty comparable talent. That might be a little bit generous.
Yeah. I don't know. It'll just depend on how well Joe Milton plays, if they can cover that. But I just feel pretty comfortable in Tennessee winning the game by more than 5.5 points. Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see. I'm not excited about that game at all. I think Florida State's going to murder the Eagles.
Yeah, I would think so. They should. I don't know that Boston College is any better than Southern Miss. And FSU hung up 69 or 66 on Southern Miss last week.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I forgot to talk about Phil Dracovic. I feel like he's that time at Boston College with that terrible O-line. I think that might have done something to Phil. He just doesn't look like the same guy as he did when he first got to Chestnut Hill. And I just don't get why. Like, I get it how he was angry. He felt like Brian Kelly never gave him a chance. I mean, Brian Driscoll said that about it. Like, he felt like Phil should have had a chance to play more. He just blindly picked Ian Book without even giving Phil a shot. But Phil complains so much about social media, like especially in the offseason about Notre Dame. Just get over it, man. Like, I don't get why you had to complain like every month about how you got treated at Notre Dame. I don't know. But I just don't. I definitely feel like he's not the same quarterback as he was coming out of high school.
Yeah, I was a big fan when he started at Boston College.
I thought he would do very well there.
Yeah, the first game that I remember him standing out was they were playing North Carolina. They were overmatched, and he was single-handedly keeping them in the game. They were in the red zone, down by a score. He kept them in the entire game. He was just throwing guys off of him. He looked like Josh Allen and throwing darts and looking like just a gamer, a baller, a guy that would just carry a team, lead a team, do whatever he needed to do to will a team to win. And I was high on Phil Dracovic out of the gate.
Yeah, and I saw that preview, and I heard he was like not happy that fans are booing him. I mean, you're in Pittsburgh, man. That kind of fan base, you can't talk down to the fans. Yeah. Also, Tyler Buckner is going to be starting at Alabama. I feel like he has better arm strength than Jalen Milroe. He just has to cut out the interceptions. Like, he can't be an equal opportunity touchdown to interception quarterback like he was in South Bend if he wants to be a starter in the SEC West. So
yeah, it's only taken 2 games for me to go completely south on my national championship selection. And Alabama, my goodness, can anyone envision them playing successful football in the playoff with Tyler Buckner at quarterback? Okay.
I'm rooting for Tyler. He seems like a great guy in all the Notre Dame interviews, but he's not an Alabama starting caliber quarterback. He's just not. They could lose to LSU. They could lose to Tennessee again. I mean, they could lose 4 games. They could lose to one of A&M or Auburn.
As a Notre Dame fan, you're holding your head like this would be the worst thing in the world for Alabama.
It's just shocking because, like, as soon as I've been watching college football since about like 2007 is my earliest memories, and like the year after, like Alabama's been so good, and it's crazy to see them fall off like this. It's like surprising to me.
fall off like this. Okay,
They're
again,
not fall
pump the
off,
brakes a
but
little
like they
bit.
look bad. They do not look like a team that.
Okay, if we need to, I'm not talking to you when I say this,
Okay.
Will. I'm talking to everybody that we can't have it both ways. We can't be talking about Texas being a national championship contender
I'm not.
and
They have to prove that
Alabama
they can beat the
falling
bad
off the
team.
rails. I saw
They-
two teams that were within a score, 5 minutes left. Bama with a lead going into the fourth quarter, all of that. So there's not that much of a difference. And we saw an Alabama quarterback throw the ball away and basically give up 2 scores. Basically, if you take, and of course, you need a quarterback. So if they don't have the quarterback, then they are headed toward 8-4, 9-3, and maybe they don't. But I would be a bit cautious if we're writing off Alabama.
And I don't trust Texas until I see them consistently beating the teams in the Big 12 that they should be, because they haven't done that in a long time.
No.
Yeah.
But they haven't won a game like they won last weekend.
That's true.
Since they beat Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. That was the end of the season. So there was nothing to gain from that.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you want to count some of the Oklahoma wins that they had, 2018, 2015. Those Oklahoma teams were probably comparable to this Alabama team if this Alabama team is dropped off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Mark, should be an interesting week. Just ready for that Ohio State game, man. I can't wait for that game.
Will, before we let you go, yes, I know you can't, and we will go nuts starting on Monday. I've already had conversation with Notre Dame media to bring them on starting on Monday. John Kennedy contacted me.
Yes.
And others. So we will do as many live streams, and I'll post as many videos as people want.
By the way, one thing, Mark, you need to upload these you and Corey conversations. They're gold. That I always like. Even if I go to bed, I wake up and I put on the you and Corey conversations. You need to upload those onto the main channel. They are gold.
If we had more time, we'd start a podcast.
Yeah.
But I appreciate that. That's very nice of you. Yeah. Will, did you take account of who was announcing tonight's games? When blank name says Devin Gardner called a hell of a game, does he mean, was he doing the Maryland, Virginia?
He did the Maryland. He was the color commentator of the Maryland.
Okay. I didn't necessarily. So I don't know if these guys are joking. It was okay. He at least waited until the final minute of the game before saying anything embarrassing. Did you hear this comment that he made with about a minute left in the game?
I think I muted it, but
so it's about a minute in the game, and I hadn't been paying attention for the entire. But yeah, I just think he did a reasonably good job. And I've heard him elsewhere. He's fine. He just basically is kind of like the kind of guy you would expect to see on ESPNU. He's okay. He says all the obvious things. Obviously, he knows football, but he made a comment, Will, that just, I hadn't been listening to the game forever. I'm like on my laptop, just got the game on in the corner of my eye. And all of a sudden with like 90 seconds, he starts to get critical about the way Maryland's not running the play clock and so forth and so on. And the play-by-play announcer's like, it doesn't really matter. Kind of, it's 42-14.
It's 42-14, man.
His comment is, crazier things have happened. And I'm like, I couldn't wait to get to Twitter immediately when I saw that and post. And I didn't know it was Devin Gardner. I had no idea at that point it was Devin Gardner. So I go to Twitter and I post, crazier things have happened. FS1 play-by-play. I didn't know who said it. Maryland's up by 14 with 1:39 left. Okay, really, let's start a list. This would be the most historic comeback in the history of college football if this happened. It is impossible. We could get a team together with the real MVP and Will and me, and we could go out there and snap the ball up by 28 points with a $139 and protect that lead.
Yeah.
So I was like, what?
We just got to recover one onside kick and then it's over.
So
That's
anyway.
That's interesting.
Anything else, Will?
Nothing I can think of. I mean, Washington should blow the roof off of Michigan State with their passing. That's the only other notable game that I didn't think I talked about.
All right. Talk to Corey. Maybe you can bug him into doing more. And I shouldn't talk because Corey always calls in here. Not always, but he routinely calls in here at times. And I never when he's going live, and he does a great job, of course. So, but he's just always talking Iowa. So that's the deal. All right. Will.
Have a good night.
You too. Thanks. Got our Notre Dame show post game after the Central Michigan struggle. That game's at 2:30, I believe, on NBC. Peacock, who knows who's showing that game, but I noticed 2:30 Eastern, so that's the typical NBC slot for Notre Dame. Notre Dame and Central Michigan will do post game on the Notre Dame channel. I should have asked Will if he's showing up for that one, but our two Irish brothers and possibly Will on that post game tomorrow, so check that out. All right. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. We got the real MVP on the line.
Hey, Mark, how you doing this evening?
Oh, I'm doing just fine. Just fine.
Loved you putting Corey on blast. Air Force did beat Utah State by like 25 points, so the game just went final.
Yeah, the mighty Hawkeyes won by 10, and the Air Force Falcons by whatever they pretty much wanted to. They were up 39-7 at halftime.
I think the final score was 39-14.
Yeah, so they basically mailed it in the second half. So they scored 39 points in the first half. Yeah, we had a good time with that because Corey was just touting Utah State as like they could contend for a Power 5 conference championship or something. It was just
I was in that chat saying they lost to Weber State last year. Any team that loses to Weber State's probably not a good football team. I know that's a bit of a limb to go out on, but it'd be amazing if 2 years ago, Alabama might be a good football team, Mark. I tell you what, 7-5, everybody thought I was crazy for saying Bama's going 7-5, but every day that goes by, I just look more and more correct of that possibility happening.
Okay, I'm glad you said possibility. You are. I would not be shocked at this point. I would have been shocked a couple weeks ago, but not that they've dropped the game that I was not surprised that they lost, but I did pick them to win. And now with the insertion of Tyler Buckner of 3 touchdowns and 5 interceptions last year, but the division competition doesn't look to be as daunting as it was. So we could have a jumbled mess in the SEC West.
Well, in 2 weeks they play Ole Miss. Ole Miss looks like they're the better team right now. I mean, they've got the best win.
Play Texas.
Yeah, but they've got the best win in Tulane.
They played Tulane.
Imagine Alabama being 500 after 4 games, Mark.
I somehow believe Alabama would probably get by Tulane as well. Tulane with a backup quarterback.
Hey, don't disrespect Tulane. They're a decent football team.
Oh, they're a really good football team. But they had their backup quarterback in, and they're still a group of 5 team, which means they are not one of the I don't care. The more I look at this, the more I become convinced that there is a wider and wider gap between these 2 levels of play. I went through my head while I'm watching football tonight because I thought, who in the group of 5 have won games against a Power 5? It's like 39-5. And that's typical. That's just another season of results between the Power 5 and the group of 5. So I think the other reason that caused me to go down that path was another rankings conversation during our earlier live stream. And to see these group of 5 teams ranked with the Power 5 teams, these these 11-2, 10-3 group of 5 teams being ranked with 9-4, 8-5 Power 5 teams is just completely ludicrous. So
yeah, I get you, Mark. I want to correct something. Utah State's ended up scoring a late touchdown to make it 21-39.
Okay.
So, You know what else is crazy, Mark, is if we gave this group of 5 an automatic playoff spot in the future, can you imagine how much they would get embarrassed? I feel like that would be just a horrendous idea, but, everybody's got to have a seat at the table, I guess, even though most people don't belong at the table.
Especially since the ranks of the group of 5 has only been lessened by the best schools going into the Power 5.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, I want to ask you, do you know who Josh Pate is from Late Kick with Josh Pate?
Absolutely.
He was talking.
Yes.
He was talking about what the best conference is in all of America after 2 weeks. And I want to quote him word for word, okay? No one will be better than the SEC this year.
Okay.
What's your thoughts on that?
So he stated that after this last weekend of play.
This was live streamed 1 day ago.
So again, if we're talking about the results on the field, if we're talking about what I believe, and I'm going to take recruiting rankings into it, and I'm going to project forward to say we're going to see this in the NFL draft this season, and then the next draft, and then the next draft, and it's all going to be proven out if we take all that into consideration. But the only thing that matters in comparing these conferences are the results on the field, that if you are being legitimate about it and just looking at results on the field and being fair and accurate, then there are not enough results left in the regular season for the SEC to prove to be the best conference. And right now, the SEC has basically is the most likely candidate to be, based on the results, the worst conference. I still believe it's the best conference, but the results have not shown that.
Well, that's where you go too far, in my opinion. I'm somewhere in the middle because the Big 12 is really bad this year. Just they've had some horrendous
losses. What are you saying that from?
Losing to Rice, losing to Texas State, losing to Wyoming.
Yeah, but they've won more significant games.
Yeah, they've also lost more significant games.
What significant games have they lost?
I told you, Rice, Wyoming, Texas State.
Games. They're
but if you have the middle of your conference losing to Texas State or Rice, that's not a good look.
Well, we don't know where the middle of the conference is. We're anticipating that to be the case.
Well, we got to anticipate that with every game. Otherwise, we can't evaluate it because we don't know where Alabama and Texas are going to be.
Yeah, we have to assume to a certain extent. And one other defense for the SEC is that Texas is definitely, until proven otherwise, definitely the best team in the Big 12. And Alabama's somewhere, who knows where, in the SEC pecking order. They could be as low as 5th or 6th. So maybe that win's not as great as we think it is. It was on the road.
I understand that. His point was like the North Carolina, South Carolina game, for example.
Yeah.
South Carolina is probably the 8th to 10th best SEC team. North Carolina could be the 2nd or 3rd best ACC team. So even though it's an impressive win, how much does that really matter if you're trying to equal out the seeding?
Yeah, but I don't know how he can come up with the SEC, again, based on the results being the best conference. I can see his argument that it's not the worst conference. And again, I completely agree with him if we are just taking my own beliefs and convictions about if we started a tournament tomorrow and said everybody's playing everybody, I'm taking the SEC. If everybody could conceivably play everybody could play 60-some football games, I am taking the SEC to come out with the best record. Absolutely. I would put my money, I would put a significant amount of money on the SEC to win the most games. But we're not doing that. We're seeing that the SEC can't win games and is not winning the games. And so when the SEC does win the games, that backs up our premise that it's the best conference. So it has to take away from us believing it's the best conference when they don't win those games.
You're right, but most of the games are them playing up in competition, not playing equal or down in competition. The only equal-like matchups I've seen so far is Texas, Bama, Florida State, LSU, Mississippi State, Arizona, and Auburn, Cal.
But that's pretty much that's almost the entire slate of games.
Yeah, but they went 2-2 in those games.
So Vandy played up in playing Wake Forest.
Yes.
Probably. Okay, fine. They lost. They lost by 2 scores. So that's what should happen.
Right.
So the ACC basically confirmed the North Carolina, South Carolina. That jury's still out. There's a lot of assumption made if we think that North Carolina is definitely the second best team in the ACC. Wow, that's a huge leap from what they've been. And to think that South Carolina is suddenly just the 8th or 9th or 10th best team in the SEC, it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy because we're giving North Carolina that kind of weight based on what they did against South Carolina. We're giving South Carolina that hit based on what they did against North Carolina.
Well, Mark, what did South Carolina go last year in SEC play? Do you know?
They must have went 4-4 if they went 8-5.
Yeah, they went 4-4, so they were dead on average, which would put you at 7 or 8. And they're probably going to take a step back this year. I don't see how it's
down to 14. Okay, sure.
If you're average, you're probably 7th. I mean,
and
you can put them 6 or 8.
What did North Carolina do in the ACC? They went 6-2. They lost the championship game by 4 scores.
Yeah, but they made the championship game. That's got to matter.
Yeah, from a weaker of 2 divisions, so they probably were. They definitely were not the best team. That was Clemson. They were not most likely Florida State. They were, they lost to North Carolina State. They lost to Georgia Tech. I don't know. There was such a layer of teams there that you could rank North Carolina anywhere from 2 to 6. So, yeah, if they're the same teams that they were last year. On the other hand, we cannot give, based on that logic, we cannot give the SEC credit for beating Virginia. So that out-of-conference game is basically...
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's the same equivalent as Kentucky beating Ball State and Eastern Kentucky, in my opinion.
Yeah, so
it's
really
meaningless.
I got to think that Texas A&M and Miami, again, we have to project a lot here. That's a pretty meaningful game comparing conferences.
Maybe. Who knows? Does Texas A&M go 5-7 or 4-8 again?
And that game wasn't close. Like that game, not that it wasn't in doubt, not that it was a blowout. It wasn't that, but it was like significantly different.
Miami was the clearly better team on the field, but they didn't blow them out completely.
No, they didn't blow them out, but they were clearly the better team.
Right. I would agree with that.
Was clearly in a game that we all anticipated, most of us anticipated to be a great game. It was a great game into the third quarter. Then Florida State scored 31 points in a row. I don't know if they're going to do that against anybody in the ACC this year.
Yeah, but Florida State's the favorite to win the ACC. Where's LSU in the rankings right now?
I don't care where they are in the rankings. What does that have to do with anything?
I meant, where are they projected to finish in the SEC? They're not going to be the SEC champion. I doubt that. I mean, there's a hodgepodge in the SEC West. They could finish anywhere from 1st to 4th.
Well, I got to think that after we saw LSU get blown up in the fourth quarter by Florida State, that a lot of people were saying, "Oh, well, that's not the team in the West." But then we see Alabama lose and Texas A&M lose, and now we're thinking, okay, well, LSU definitely has a shot in the West, so they could be the champion in the West. They were the champion last year, and they weren't really that good. They were a good team, but they weren't. They were a top 10 to 15 team.
Right, but what helped them out is in bowl season when they played Purdue, they completely destroyed them. I know Purdue had their head coach gone, their quarterback gone, but still beating a team by 8 or 9 touchdowns.
Yeah, I understand and give LSU all sorts of credit. And LSU actually had NFL opt-outs as well. But my goodness, Purdue wasn't even the same. Like they're when you're a dependent team on quarterback and wide receivers and they're all gone, that's like Like they just showed up as a shell of themselves. So yeah, for a guy that I typically like to give the some validity to bowl scores, that was one that was difficult to give much credence to.
I understand that.
What is our conclusion here? So Josh Pate said the SEC is still the best conference. So I understand within context, if you're taking everything into consideration and what we believe, what many of us, including me, believe to be true, I still believe it's the best conference, but it is not showing itself to be the best conference on the field. I understand your point about seeding. I am all into seeding. If there is a king of seeding teams and saying this matchup has a lot of relevance because they're like seeded teams, this one not so much because they're one of the three best in this conference and they're one of the three worst in that conference, all of that, I've been seeding teams for years and years and years and saying and giving various weights to games because of that. So I get the point, but these are the matchups that we've seen, and the SEC's losing basically all of them, almost all of them. And to beat Arizona at home in overtime.
Yeah, but Mississippi State was picked to be the worst team in the SEC West.
But they're coming off a 9-4 season and have their quarterback and most of their defensive production back. Like, this is supposed to be a good team, and they're taking on an Arizona team that hasn't been good in years. Won 5 games last year. They're playing them at home in what is a difficult place to play, and they win in overtime. And the game ended on a measurement that was highly questionable. Like, they could still be playing. That's not impressive. That Cal Auburn showing, these wins are awfully weak.
Yeah, but they're like seeded matchups. They're like seeded matchups. What do you want them to do?
Horrible last year. They were horrible. Now
Auburn was 5-7 last year.
I do say last year, and we don't know about this year, but last year, if we understand personnel changes and how teams get better and worse, but I don't think that there was anyone projecting, Cal has picked up X, Y, and Z in the transfer portal, and they're going to be a completely different team this year. No, we all anticipated bad team. And that game, if they've got a field goal kicker, they win. They missed.
Well, I mean, if we played the if game, then, none of the results would ever matter in the history of ever.
Well, that's what we're talking about, though. We're not having a conversation if we're not talking about what ifs. And I'm just
I'm talking about actual results on the field. You can't just say, hey, what if this guy had a good field goal kicker? That'd be like saying Ohio State. What if they had a good field goal kicker? They would be the national champions. We just can't.
That's a valid point to make.
But it's not Auburn's fault.
I'm not saying that erases results. Yes, field goal kicking is part of the game, and you got to have a field goal kicker. That is accentuating the point that it was that close and that Cal could have defeated Auburn. And that shouldn't happen in anyone's universe, at least post Aaron Rodgers.
I think they're just two bottom of the rung teams that are playing each other. But
there's a lot of projections, including myself, that Auburn will be fairly competitive in the SEC.
Well, if they are, then it's a bad result. But if they go what they did last year, then I think it's an okay result for the SEC. We can't give every SEC team isn't the 27 Yankees. Not every SEC team's going to be in the 96 Bulls. There's bad SEC teams. There's bad Big Ten teams. There's bad ACC teams. There's a lot of bad Big 12 teams this year, Mark. But
I know. I'm not expecting, for example, when Penn State went to Auburn last year and knocked them around in the second half and beat them by 28, I was the last person on here beating my chest about the Big Ten. I just said that's a completely non-factor. Penn State, you got to give them credit. They had to play a football game and they took care of business. Let's give them credit, but this doesn't prove anything, because I had all sorts of people saying, well, look at Penn State. They went to Auburn and they destroyed them. And well, that's what they should do. They're the 7th best team in the country, apparently, and Auburn's no good. So this proves nothing about the Big Ten being better in any way, shape, or form, or comparable to the SEC at that time. So I get that, but this is not what we're talking about. We're not talking about Tennessee going out to Cal and beating them by 4 touchdowns or struggling. We're talking about Auburn. And so I would just expect better results. Vegas expected better results out of the SEC. Bama was a favorite. LSU was a favorite. Texas A&M was a favorite. Auburn was a favorite. Mississippi State was a favorite by 10 points. There are better expected results. South Carolina was like a 2.5-point underdog. They lost by 14 in a game that was like 31-14 in the fourth quarter.
Here's my point. I'm going to keep on the Auburn Cal. Okay, Auburn finished 2-6. Okay, there was 3 SEC teams that finished 2-6 last year. Okay, so they are record-wise one of the 3 worst SEC teams.
Yes, I'm well aware
Cal
of the record. Yes.
Yeah, Cal finished 2-7.
Yes.
They were tied for the 4th worst Pac-12 team. That is an even matchup.
It is by record last season, but if anyone watched those 2 teams play or put the games into context, Auburn was competitive against teams like LSU, Mississippi State, Texas A&M, and so forth. Cal was losing to Colorado. And they did have their small competitive spots throughout the season, but that Auburn team was a top 40 or 45 team in the country, and Cal was more like 80. But
that just shows how good the SEC depth was last year.
Yeah.
You can't play it both ways to where the SEC's got to be one of the deepest conferences every year. They're going to have 10 of the top 40 teams, and then next year they come back a bit and hold it against them.
What's our conclusion here? My conclusion is that the results on the field say that the SEC is not even close to being the best conference, but I know better because those are a limited number of results. Whatever the number is, I think they're 3-6. Are they 3-6? Somebody's 3-6.
3-6 is right.
Yeah, 3-6 in the Power 5. I would even include the Tulane games since they are like a Power 5. They're Iowa, they're NC State, somebody like that. So I would even throw that in and say the SEC wins a game like that, 4-6. So the results aren't good, and then you can give context to them. But my goodness, A&M losing at Miami in the manner in which they did, and LSU giving up 31 straight points in the second half, and Bama losing by 2 scores at home, and being competitive but being outclassed. Certainly not the better team on the field in that game. Ole Miss, that was not the greatest win in the world. It was close. Backup quarterback for Tulane. Like, give me one impressive showing. Give me one impressive showing. See, that's the problem. There's a lot of disappointment. There's a lot of underachievement. There's a ton of underachievement. There's no one that overachieved or no one that delivered anything.
But your definition of overachieving or delivering what they need to is like if Florida beating Utah, South Carolina beating Clemson. I'm saying Mississippi State beating Arizona, that is a good result for the SEC. That is like seeded teams in the SEC winning. Auburn beating Cal, that is like seeded teams in the SEC winning. The sky is not falling for the SEC. The SEC is somewhere in the middle. I don't think they're the worst conference.
I didn't say they were the worst conference.
You've listed them last.
No. Have you listened to anything I've said?
You said you think they are the better about the results.
They've had the worst results. They've had the worst results.
See, I disagree with that. I don't think they've had the worst results. I don't think they're great results, but I don't think they're the worst results. I think
it's gone out and done anything. Zero. Just like
that's where I disagree with you.
Like last year, I was saying, look at this conference. Florida's beating Utah and Georgia's blasting Oregon. And when it was all said and done, of course, you got a win against Ohio State and you got 2 wins against Clemson. It's not even close. The amount of quality wins that conference had, Kansas State and Purdue and all these games that they racked up out of conference in the win column versus every other conference, wasn't even close. But I got to be fair. I got to call it the way it is. And this year, even though I know loaded with talent, NFL draft picks, the recruiting, they'll probably come through in bowl season, and especially more importantly in the playoffs. I anticipate all that. It's not happening, and nobody has won a significant game. Nobody has won a Texas beat Bama. Nobody has won a Florida State beat LSU. A North Carolina beat South Carolina. Mississippi State beating a 5-7 Arizona team in overtime at home where it's difficult to play, traveling across country, does not get it. They have not won any games.
That's fine. That's your opinion, Mark. But can I at least get you to reconsider the Big 12? I mean, they lost to Rice, Texas State, Wyoming. They struggled against Sam Houston.
Oh, they have worse results than the SEC, but they have better results too. They're all over.
I guess it just depends what you value then.
Well, Texas beating Bama, I value that on the road.
I do too, but
where Bama hasn't lost an out-of-conference game in forever, I value that a ton. I value Baylor hanging in with Utah until the final minute of the game. I think that's pretty significant. If Baylor turns out to be who we think they are, they're middle of the road. They're 4-5 in the Big 12. And Utah is contending for a Pac-12 championship. Baylor actually outplayed them.
Right, but my problem with that result is Baylor lost to Texas State.
And okay, but I'm talking about that particular game. You're right. They blew a game to Texas State, and that's horrible. Texas Tech performing as well as they did against Oregon. If they get a different call in the end zone with about 90 seconds to play, they probably win against Oregon. So they lose a gut-wrenching game against Oregon. That's a pretty understandable loss.
Yeah, they've got acceptable losses, or questionable close losses, but they actually have really bad losses as well.
3 of them.
That's my issue.
3, right? Any more?
Yeah, but the SEC has 0.
Yeah, the SEC has just lost every standoff. They have lost every challenge.
Right. It just depends I guess it just depends what you value more. Because I just have a hard time looking at past atrocious results.
I value all of it to some degree.
Well, I do, but I'm saying I guess I value the atrocious results more than you do.
When I laid out my conference rankings, there isn't anything that we've talked about here in the last 15 minutes that I didn't state.
I know, but I thought it was a good discussion, Mark. I enjoyed it.
Oh, it is a good discussion. Absolutely. I'm not saying you're crazy, you're a lunatic. I've used those words to other people at times. No. In no way. I totally get your point. And you're right. There are some conclusions we come to with the SEC where we expect more, and therefore this becomes a bit startling. But I don't see them having a path to being objectively the best conference during the regular season that we can say on Thanksgiving weekend if they go 4-0 against the ACC. Now, that would be pretty impressive. So if they beat Clemson, and who else would be in there? Louisville and
Florida State over Florida.
If they win that game, okay, yeah, maybe there is a path to being the best conference. But I'm thinking reasonably with that's all they've got left. They got Arkansas playing BYU tomorrow. They've got Ole Miss and Georgia Tech. Those are basically games they have to win. That's not really going to add much to their resume, but they're going to be okay wins. But those wins need to happen. And I'm almost positive those are the only 2 games that we've got until Thanksgiving weekend.
LSU, I think, plays Army.
Okay.
Hey, you asked.
Okay. I did.
So
Oh, and they all play some derivative of the Citadel, the second to last. Their FCS record is going to be phenomenal. That's the one thing I did notice when I was ranking the conferences is that they're 11-0 against the FCS. So that has certainly boosted their.
some of them were trying to lose, Mark. I think some of them were trying to lose, like Missouri and Kentucky.
We got Missouri and Kansas State.
Yeah, I know. I think Missouri probably pulls that off and win. I'm surprised with the line. It's only 3.5.
That would be a nice win. That would be a really nice win.
Hopefully we get over the Big 12 if we get that win.
That would do something for your conference right there, in my eyes.
Anyway, Mark, that's all I got for you. Thanks for the discussion, and fight on to the Akron Zips.
Okay. Thanks, DeReal. All right, let's keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. We got Land Found on the line. Before we get to him, Amazon links in the description section of all the videos. I cannot stress this enough. We've tested this out with 20 people. You have the same shopping experience. So when you go to Amazon right now, whatever link you use, if you use our link, it's going to act exactly the same. And if it doesn't, stop using it. Please contact me and let me know, because 20 people have said, I didn't even know. It's the same thing. And you help us grow the channel, build the channel. It doesn't cost you a penny. It's not like they add on the Voice of College Football surcharge of $3. No, nothing's added. Just think about this. Amazon is raking in $1.7 trillion a month. I think that's what I heard. I read that somewhere, $1.7 trillion a month. We are lagging way behind that. We're in the 1.2 trillion per month range. So we're trying to catch Amazon. Help us do that. All right. Welcome in Land Found.
Unnecessary roughness on the Voice of College Football, holding on the real MVP. The two fouls will offset each other. The real MVP, third down. The real MVP wins the debate.
The real MVP wins the debate.
Wins the debate.
Does he?
Yes.
Based on your judgment.
Well, here's where I got confused, Mark.
Okay.
You were saying something different than the top 25 that actually makes sense.
Okay.
Because you said the SEC, if you had to bet on it, you would pick them. But your objective results on the field have said otherwise. So I was confused.
Absolutely.
I'm like,
how does that confuse you?
Because you're saying, because the top 25 that actually makes sense is based on the results on the field.
Yes.
But
I don't have to bet. I don't have to center my betting projections on what has already happened. Like,
but you said pound for pound,
that's completely subjective.
The best conference.
Pardon me?
Didn't you say pound for pound, the SEC is the best conference?
In my estimation, yes.
But the top 25 that actually makes sense and the objective results don't say that. So honestly, while I was listening, I'm like, wait a second, this is going against Mark's logic.
These are two different things. Okay. Let me try to explain this.
Okay.
We have results on. Let's say the SEC had such a recruiting advantage over everyone. It was just a joke that all 14 teams in the SEC were every year 1 through 14 in the recruiting rankings. They just had so much talent. It was crazy. Every 5-star signed with an SEC school. And then the NFL draft, 28 out of 32 picks in every first round every year were SEC. It's like not even close. Everything that doesn't relate to the field, but is a indicator of who has the great talent. Okay. But they play games in 2023 and the SEC loses all these games. Well, these indicators have to tell my functioning brain that this means something, that these talent rankings do mean something. It's been proven. Not going to go into that debate, but it's been proven that these recruiting rankings mean something and NFL draft selections mean something. But regardless, if they're losing the games on the field, and I am making my conference rankings just based on what are the results on the field. I don't care who got drafted where. I don't care what the recruiting rankings are. I don't care what I even think would happen if they replayed all these games. I can only go by the results on the field. That's different than you saying, Mark, you got to put your mortgage on the line, your car payment on the line, and go bet games in the future. That's a completely emotional judgment and logical judgment, depending on how my brain works, about what's going to happen in the future.
So then what's the top 25 that actually makes sense?
It's a resume ranking. It's based completely on resume.
Oh.
Like Ohio State, for example. Do I personally believe that Ohio State is one of the 25 best teams in the country? Yeah. I don't know a soul alive that's watching college football that doesn't think that they're one of the 25 best, if not one of the 5 best teams in the country. Are they in my top 25 right now? No, they're not even in the top 25 because they played Indiana and Youngstown State and they didn't look impressive. So they don't have the resume right now to be placed in the top 25.
I see. Okay. I still think the penalties were offset. Unnecessary roughness on the voice of college football. Offsides on the real MVP. Third down, the real MVP. He keeps possession.
Okay. All
Okay.
right.
Hey,
Well, I have somebody to come in here and tell me if I won or lost a debate. I think that's the first one I've lost.
well, I'm an official referee as of yesterday, but tomorrow I go to my field training course.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I make
That's
a little
great.
make a little extra money on the weekends. Yeah. It's for soccer though.
Yeah, I see that. That's
Yeah.
what I would have guessed there.
By the way, really quick before I get to my takes,
Sure.
the 2026 World Cup is going to be hosted in North America. Did you know that?
No, and I was okay with not knowing that. That's quite all right. I'm sure you've enlightened some people out there. That's great.
Yeah. Hey, what do you think about Deion? The whole riff between I don't even want to call it a riff because it was really nothing, and I think the media made a big thing out of it because that's what they do. I like what the Colorado State coach said was
Yes.
what everyone was thinking. Yeah, I don't think he meant it in a bad way. I don't think he was he probably admires Deion and he loves Deion. But then the media tried to make it something that it wasn't.
Did the media make something out of it, or did Deion make something out of it?
Deion is going to use it as fuel. He's going to use that to
So
his
he made
advantage.
something out of it.
But in a positive sense.
In a positive sense?
Well, to fuel his team. To fuel
Yes,
his team for
to
the
fuel his
victory.
team, but not a positive sense in terms of bringing unity and harmony and everything's okay. No, he made a big deal about it. Like he got all offended by it. He said, well, he made it personal.
Well, they've been saying it's personal since day one. So the personal thing isn't new.
I am so over all these antics from Deion, but I think he's doing a great job.
I can't get enough of it. I love the man.
Oh, I am very neutral on Deion. I could care less about him. I don't like him, hate him. I could care less. He doesn't move me one direction or the other.
Confridatis. Mark, I just uploaded a clip on Twitter of Deion jacking one in his Cincinnati Reds return
Oh, that's cool.
on his second at bat.
I'm an old baseball fan, so I can get behind that. Yeah, this is the point I'm making is like yourself, you're saying that the media made something about this, blew this out of proportion. Well, of course, they want clicks, but Deion's the one who made something out of it. So Jay Norvell, basically, I want to make sure I got this straight because I'm not in on this kind of stuff. I could care less. I think this is stupid stuff that a mature man of what is he? He's about as old as I am. He's like 50. Should be above these things. But you're right. He's fueling his team. And if he wants to use that as motivation for his team, then that's what he chooses to do. And it's effective. And he's effective, obviously, or at least he's been effective for 2 games. But Jay Norvell said something about, what did he say about his sunglasses and about his hats?
When you do an interview, you should take off your hat indoors. That's old school. That's the way I was raised. Take off your hat when you come indoors. Yeah. And definitely when you're talking to somebody, you take off your shades so you can look them in the eye.
Okay. Now, the next thing that I want to know that's critical in this, because this happens all the time, is people jump on coaches for saying certain things. Did Jay Norvell initiate that statement, or was he asked to make a comment about something?
I don't know. My guess is that he was initiated. I don't think anybody from the Colorado State media team would, trigger him in that, or not trigger him, but I don't know.
For example, and I want to stay it on the topic you wanted to be on. Ryan Day took all sorts of hits for making comments about the hash marks in college football, and that he was somewhat complaining about the hash marks and they might have made a kick if they had it. He didn't say any of that, and he didn't initiate any of that. He was asked by Joel Klatt, what would you change in college football in terms of rules on the field? So he's going to give an honest answer. And then suddenly he's complaining about the hash. No, he's not complaining about the hash marks. He was asked, what rule would you change in college football?
Yeah.
So back to Deion. You're on the bandwagon. You love Deion. You're uploading clips from 1992.
I'm soaking it all in. I can't get enough of him. Those shades, they're on sale. They're affordable, $67. You can find them at Blenders. I know I'm kind of marketing for them, but whatever. I tweeted that too. Oh, I'd buy them. Yeah, those shades, and I'd rock them too. Mark, do you remember? I don't have to tell you this, but from Florida State, this is prime time. This is 2-1 from the Dallas Cowboys and the Atlanta Falcons. This is the dual athlete, one of the very few in history to play at that level, two sports.
Yeah. Oh, I lived through it. Yes, I understand.
He went from the HBCU to Colorado Buffalo. I pointed out let me not get too wound up here or start jumping around in too many directions. Now he's telling these kids in this nation, come to Colorado and be yourself. And let's work magic together. Whereas before you go and you have to conform and you have to do things a certain way. Of course, that still goes on in Deion's program. Let's not make no mistake. But he's telling these kids, look at my sons. Come do it like them. Come be yourself and join us. Mark, I'm telling you right now, if I was ever at that level and I was not reprimanded, but reproved today while making a similar comment. But if I was at that level, you know me, I'm you all day. But if I was being recruited by Mario Cristobal and Deion Sanders, I'm going to think twice. And
that was going to be where I was going next, knowing that you're a U fan to the hill, that you're all in on Deion Sanders.
I mean, I think if what they're saying is, and I think you know this too, I'm just repeating what everybody knows. If they start winning at Colorado, who doesn't want to go play for Deion Sanders? And look he knows what he's doing with the chains and the hat and the shades and the persona and the charisma and the attraction. He knows exactly what he's doing. They're going to flock to Boulder, Colorado.
So let's understand that your opinion on this, as everyone's to a degree, is biased. You like Deion Sanders.
No, I love Deion Sanders.
You love Deion Sanders. So the answer to your question is, who wouldn't want to play for Deion Sanders? Believe me, there are student athletes out there that wouldn't want to play for Deion Sanders.
Because they're not being recruited by him.
No, there are student athletes that are good enough to play at Colorado that will go to Ohio State or Notre Dame or Texas or somewhere else because they don't want to play for Deion Sanders. So let's not make it like everybody's in love with Deion Sanders across the world and that his shtick is for everyone, because it's not. And that's okay, because not everyone wants to play for Kirby Smart. Not everyone wants to play for Nick Saban. So not everyone's in love with that. And it is a bit of a shtick. I don't want to I don't want to question. I don't think it's my place to question the authenticity of it, whether that's an act or it's real or whatever, because that's not my place. I don't believe that's for me to question his authenticity. I kind of question when he uses the term that this is his calling, only because I don't think that most people that have a calling usually are drawn to that calling regardless of money. He, of course, wouldn't be at the University of Colorado coaching football for $25,000 a year.
Well, I think,
and that's okay.
Yeah.
He should earn money just like the rest of us as much as he possibly can, of course.
Yeah. Hey, I was looking for a segue into this, but maybe this will work. So, because of the influence of the voice of college football, no, really, my past experiences with football, just growing up, and the Netflix, the Last Chance U, was incredible. So last Saturday, I said, you know what? I'm going to watch something other than Miami. So I started flipping channels and going through the games. And I realized one thing. I was watching Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss. I was watching Josh Heupel at Tennessee. I was watching some other games. And I said to myself, remember, I'm coming from a 5-time national championship program. Tennessee is not going to win a national championship. Ole Miss is not going to win a national championship. These programs. So I said to myself, oh, now I understand what Heupel and Kiffin and these other coaches are doing. They're collecting generational wealth. Those programs, the objective of football, the objective in soccer is to win, to score goals and to win. The objective in football is the same, to win. To score more, to score your opponent and to win. Those programs are not going to win national championships. And to me, when I watch football, it's about winning national championships.
Why is Tennessee not going to win a national championship?
I thought you might bring that up. Okay, so what? My response is this in preparation to this. Once every 25 years?
Actually, if a school wins a national championship every 25 years, spread across the nation in comparison to everyone else, that's highly successful if you look at it.
Okay, I understand what you mean.
There's only like 6 schools that have won a national championship this century.
Okay.
Right?
I know what you mean. Listen, I enjoyed it. I was watching Syracuse, and I said to myself, oh, okay, I get this. This is college football. This is a lot of fun. And you look at it, the different levels, and you're like, oh, it's not all professional. These guys are not all experts, especially when, like, I was watching the Syracuse game. I forgot against who. I'm like, oh, this is nice college football. I get this. I like this, but.
And so if I could try to interpret what you're trying to say here, Landfound, is that you believe at the U and in a few other locations,
correct,
there is a reasonable chance and opportunity and goal and mission to win a national championship, to win national championships.
Yes, sir.
But at a place like Syracuse, if we brought in the Syracuse president, athletic director, all those people, and they were honest with us, and we asked them, what is your goal for Syracuse football? They would have to be honest and say, it's not to win a national championship because we've got no chance of doing that. They want to make money for the university, and they want to have a good event for the students to go to, for 60,000 people to gather every Saturday and have an event to bring in students. It's a recruiting tool for not the football
exactly
program, for the school. And
exactly.
And we've got a contract with the ACC and with ESPN to make $40-some million per year on television rights. We sell jerseys and hats and all that other stuff. We make tens of millions of dollars each week. So that's why we do it. That's why we play football. And we hope that we play well enough that we don't embarrass ourselves. Like, we don't want to go 3-9. So if we go 7-5, go to a bowl game, that looks good enough. Like, we're trying.
And I'm sure I would enjoy it more if I was in person. But I realized that when I was, combing through the games, I was like, it's nice. And then I thought of Lane Kiffin and I thought of Josh Heupel, and I said, these guys are just collecting generational wealth. They're not going to win a national championship. I don't know. Hey, I caught your take on the Pat McAfee on ESPN.
Yes.
And you mentioned baseball tonight. And there's another reason why I'm bringing this, but that one's kind of personal. But it's still very fond for me, that family, the Foleys. What was I going to say? Oh, you mentioned baseball tonight. And I woke up last Saturday. I opened up my iPad. I opened up YouTube. And guess what they're showing for free on YouTube? The Bad News Bears, Buttermaker. So I'm still watching it. I haven't finished it yet. Of course, I've watched that movie 10 times in my youth. And everybody remembers Tanner and memorable scenes and Kelly Leak from that movie. A few days later, and I think you might enjoy this, and I'm done here, I promise, after this.
No, you're fine.
Thanks. Is Kendall Baker from Yahoo Sports listed the top 10 baseball movies of all time. May I run through them really briefly?
I would love to hear it. And maybe we might annoy some people because this is a college football show, but you got to understand that I am no longer, do I consider myself a baseball fan? And I don't know how I fell out of love of baseball, but I am the guy from the time I was 10 years old up until about 3 to 4 years ago that could recite everybody's rosters, everybody's statistics, everything. I would arguably been the biggest baseball fan that you ever run across. I had the extra innings package. I'd watch every game, have every game on, have them on all night, all of that. Why did I bring that up? Baseball movies. Okay. Fire.
According to Kendall Baker, best top 10. Moneyball.
Number one. Okay.
Bull Durham, which I haven't watched. 1988.
Okay.
Number
I've seen
2.
both. Okay.
Number 2. Field of Dreams. Kevin Costner, Ray Liotta.
Seen
Beautiful movie.
Sure.
Number 4, League of Their Own.
Okay. Never seen that.
Tom Hanks. Madonna.
Yes.
Rosie O'Donnell.
Oh, yeah. I'm familiar with it. I've like run by TBS and seen like a scene or two at a time, but I've never watched it start to finish. Yeah. Rosie O'Donnell, Madonna. Yep.
Yeah. The Sandlot.
Yes. Seen it.
Major League.
Seen it many times. Yes.
The Natural, 1984. Never seen
it many times. Absolutely. Robert Redford.
Oh, okay. I can see it. Little Big League.
I've never seen that movie.
I saw it. Everybody Wants Some, 2016. Never even heard of it.
No.
The Bad News Bears, number 10. And then
10.
Yeah. Runners up, 8 Man Out.
I got you. I'm sorry.
Rookie of the Year.
Yep, seen it.
Hardball. The Pride of the Yankees, For Love of the Game, The Rookie, and Angels of the Outfield. What I'm disappointed in is how come Mr. Baseball wasn't there? I like that movie.
Oh, that was the comedian. Can't think of his name.
No, was he a comedian?
Oh, I'm thinking of the guy that was going for 3,000 hits.
Yeah, that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. What? He was a comedian?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I've never seen that movie.
Yeah, it was pretty good. Anyway.
It would be difficult for me to rank them, but I have no issue with that rankings. Moneyball, I love because I was very much into stats, and it tells that whole story of the evolution of stats and then breaking down the new metrics in baseball and applying it to the field and all that. That was great. Loved it.
Me too. Me too.
Loved it. And The Natural is a great movie. The Field of Dreams, yeah, Major League, all those. Major League is one of the few experiences I've had in the theater. Now, part of this was because I grew up close to Cleveland, so
Oh.
not the Cleveland Indians, where I was in a packed theater. Like every chair was full, and people were actually screaming and like clapping and rooting and cheering during the movie.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, we lost Land Found. Land Found, great call. We appreciate it. Thank you so much for being here. If you can hear us now. Andrew, thank you so much for the super chat. Michigan State, Maryland will be really close next week. Oh, that's next week. Okay. Yeah, we get into Big Ten play. Michigan, Maryland. It could be. It could be. I believe Maryland's a significantly, decidedly better team at this point. Jeffrey's on the line. Jeffrey, thank you for your patience.
Oh, I appreciate it. I was really enjoying that conversation. The baseball movies, I've actually seen a few of those, and I'm not even really a big baseball guy myself, but I have seen a few of those movies, and some of those are classics, but I like older movies anyway. But yeah, and then it was funny with the generational wealth conversation. That was good because I'm like, most coaches and teams will never win a title in their current states. Like you can't, like even Ole Miss, like they're a great program. And I've seen a lot of people say, oh, their NIL is top notch. And I'm like, judging by all the teams and looking at the NIL that's being raked in Ole Miss is not top 5, top 10. And you're trying to expect Lane Kiffin to win a title there. How is it his fault that he's raking in money, but they're not winning a title? I don't see it. Like, for him to win a title at Ole Miss would be significant. It would be extremely difficult. Maybe not completely impossible, but it would be very hard. Tennessee, it's more likely.
We also have to understand the mathematics involved.
Mm-hmm.
There's only one champion per season.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we wait for 20 years to see how many other teams, and there's obviously going to be certain schools that are going to win multiple championships. So let's say 3 schools account for 7 of those titles, then you've only got 13 left for everyone. Like there's just not many championships to be won for us to pinpoint, oh, well, Kansas State has a chance, Stanford has a chance. Well, no, they don't. Now, it's just mathematically extremely difficult to foresee any of those schools. The last school that won a national championship that would seem ridiculous now, of course, Nebraska to a certain extent, but they're an all-time great program. So I think people understand that even though in their current state, it's unbelievable to think about Nebraska competing for a national championship, they could do it. It's possible, and they've done it in the past, of course, many, many times. But I guess Georgia Tech would be the last team that I can think of that won a national championship that I just think that's not happening again.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like Nebraska, they could win another one because I see a lot of people like on the basketball side that would say Indiana basketball can never win another title. And I'm like, we sure about that? I mean, they won 5. They've been bad for a long time, but if they get their cards together, they could do it again. I mean, they are an all-time great program. Same with Nebraska. They could do it again if they turn the program around.
Georgia Tech won its championship in a completely different world where they played in a bad ACC. The ACC wasn't even considered, like people laughed about the ACC as like, didn't even consider it with the rest of the conferences. It was almost like an American conference, and they went undefeated. They get a easy bowl bid against a Nebraska team that was like 15th in the country to play for a national championship. You know, it's just the whole bowl setup was completely different. And so they really never played anyone that significant that year.
It's not like today where if you're going to win a title, you actually have to beat someone elite to do it. You know, you're not going to, like TCU, you got the massive win over Michigan. You pulled it off, but then you get Georgia and you get Mack Truck. Like if the championship game was TCU Michigan somehow, that's what when TCU won, it has that feel of the past because like it's one game, you pulled it off against a team that you are not way worse than, even though you're not as talented. But then again, with the playoff, now that you're expanding it even further, it's going to be less and less that teams like that will ever be able to win.
If you put TCU's experience last year in the context of either 1990 Georgia Tech or 1984 BYU, it would be like TCU going through the season they went through, going 11-0, 12-0, not having to play a conference championship game because there were no conference championship games, and then going out to like the Holiday Bowl and playing South Carolina or playing Wisconsin or somebody of that range last year, and then winning that game and going, they're the national champions. They're undefeated. We're voting them number one. That's what that would have been like. That's the first time I've really put it in that framework, but that's what it was like then.
I mean, it's crazy to think about, especially with the way things are now, like you said, where it's like 4 or 5 or 6 teams every year that have a legitimate chance, and they usually do not rotate. It's usually the same teams. To think the way it was back then, it's crazy. I mean, I always, think about, because like you talk about the all-time great programs, they were built from the ground up. All these programs started out small with little stadiums, small fan bases. Football wasn't even a massive sport until after World War II. It got a lot bigger later than that. I mean, even baseball was still way bigger in the 60s, 70s. So like today, obviously, like in Indiana, these programs that are really bad, that they're just not winning. They don't have the resources and all that. Would you say that it's impossible for a team that normally loses? And I think I might maybe have asked something like this before, but a team that usually loses, can they ever win if like the university just funded them and, got a lot of money going in there and they like really prioritize? Like if Indiana suddenly said, hey, we're going to do everything in our power to make Indiana football win, could they become great? Is it impossible?
That's a great question, because there are schools. Minnesota's a good example. They're one of the largest schools in the country. The largest schools in the country are like the University of Texas, UCLA, Minnesota, Ohio State, and I'm sure people in the chat will throw in a few other ones, but I know that every time I look at enrollments at universities. So yeah, you brought up Indiana. They wouldn't be that far down the list. It's a huge university, but Minnesota's got like the largest university in the country. Like Minnesota gunning for a national championship, saying we're going to throw all of our resources into this is our goal above anything else, to winning football national championship. I think their biggest obstacle is the same thing that faces Nebraska, that faces Indiana. Actually would have less of an obstacle because there are actually more football players within that region going to Ohio. Michigan, Illinois is a pretty talented state than Minnesota. But yeah, it's funny because there seems to be something about tradition and history that seems to be a draw to these young athletes. Even though they didn't experience it, they still go to the same schools. And the other schools have to have, especially when this new TV contract kicks in, Indiana's going to be making more money in its television contract than Alabama is. Now, that's not all the money they're going to make
with all those teams too, because they're going to be all getting that money as well, which is going to maybe keep Indiana down. But yeah, they're going to be making a lot more money than almost every other program.
But they already are too.
They already are.
It's just not going to be going to be really accentuated going forward. But they already are. The Big Ten already has a slightly bigger TV contract than the SEC. So those schools now, Alabama, I'm sure, has so many other ways of making money, merchandise, ticket sales, make a lot more money. But in terms of just TV revenue, Indiana's making more than LSU, Georgia, Alabama.
It's insane. And like the academics money Indiana makes, because they're a pretty good academic institution, one of the best in the country. It's insane. I think when you mention history, that in Indiana is a perfect example of why history does matter, because I've read in just forums, people talking about it, but in the state of Indiana where basketball matters more, and for Indiana University, what did the fans in that state like? They like Notre Dame football. throughout history, it's always been Notre Dame football that the fans, gravitate toward. There are so many people, even on Twitter, they'll say, I'm an Indiana basketball fan, but I'm a Notre Dame football fan. And I don't understand that, because if the basketball fans liked football from the beginning and cared about it, Indiana football probably be good, because like you said, they have the talent to the players in the area for them to recruit to actually win. Because, like, for example, like the state of Indiana, like the top 15 players in the state, you know how you have the rankings of every state, and then where the players go, the best player goes to Ohio State. The second best player goes to Notre Dame. The third best player goes to Ohio State. Fourth goes to Notre Dame. Fifth goes to Wisconsin. Sixth maybe will go to Purdue. Seventh, Wisconsin. 8, Ohio State. And then way down at like number 14, Indiana got somebody. They finally got a player. And I'm like, if you could just recruit your own state and get these good players like these other teams, you'd win. It's like, how do you not do this? That's the thing that blows my mind. And like you said, it's the history. For whatever reason, like I said, I wasn't in the 40s and 50s and 60s. I wasn't there. None of us were there. But I don't know what gravitated those people to Notre Dame football and not Indiana. And that's what has held Indiana back. They don't have the fans. They don't have the history. Notre Dame does. And that's a key part, because a lot of these teams, they had history. Like even Minnesota, you brought up Minnesota. Even they won 3 titles in the 30s, 34, 35, 36. Minnesota did. I know that was a completely different era. It doesn't matter. But
60.
They won in 60. So I don't know. It's interesting. But I do, to your point as well, I feel like these teams can become great if things went their way, if they put effort into it and tried. And I'm not saying Indiana doesn't try at all, but they don't try hard enough. They don't try hard enough to win. A lot of programs don't.
I always have difficulty finding what you just brought up. And it always happens that I find it eventually, but I can't find it on 247 Sports. But I'm looking for example, the state of Indiana, high school football players, their top rated players from 1 to whatever, and where they've committed. I haven't taken the time to go search for it, but I don't see it here anywhere. But yeah, it is interesting. Yeah. Who is that school out there that we would consider to be the lowest right now in football status now and historically, that we could make an argument could win a national championship?
I mean, I have no idea what that answer would be, but I mean, Indiana's the losingest Power 5 program of all time, and they've got money, so maybe they could do it. If
Indiana's below Wake Forest and Oregon State.
Yeah, Indiana's the most Power 5 losses of all time. They have over 700. They were the first team to crack 700 losses last year.
So they probably played more football.
Which they did, true.
I think those two have the worst winning percentage of all time.
Probably. I think Indiana's is like 42%.
Oh, well, they're both in
good.
that range too. Yeah.
Indiana's record's like 430 something, 702, and like 40. It's like that. It's pretty bad.
I was trying to make this point to our buddy Chris Foote the other day, because he was mentioning that Cal football was really good throughout the years. And I was saying, no, it's not. It's not good. And he was making the statement that their all-time record's over 50%. So, but I said, that is a tainted statistic, because if you take everyone in the Power 5, I think Indiana, Vanderbilt, Wake, Oregon State, there might be 1 or 2 other schools out there have a below 500 record because they play so many FCS and Group of 5 teams, and they win all those games, that everyone else in the Power 5 has an over 500 all-time record. So it's not playing good football just because you're over 50% winning percentage all time, because almost every school in the Power 5 is over 50%.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I mean, for example, like there's some schools that are really weird that you would think are a lot worse than they are. But like in basketball, Utah is a perfect example. They're like in the top 20 all time in wins in college basketball. And Utah hasn't been good in 15 years. So sometimes when you look at that, because I've gone through that all-time rankings list, of wins in football, and I've seen some of these programs. I'm like, how are they up here? Like, they haven't been good my whole lifetime, but then you look back in their records back way before I was born, they won. They were good, so it's crazy. But, yeah, Indiana's always been bad outside of a few seasons. Do I legitimately think they'll ever have a shot to win a title? Probably not. But could they if they actually tried and put everything that they had into it? I think they could. I think that they would have a chance, but it is what it is. Just unfortunately, you can't change what people like, and people in the state of Indiana like Notre Dame football. But yeah, before I go, because I'm sure you've got people behind waiting to talk, and I definitely want to talk about some of the games tonight. Maryland, Virginia, that game. I was like, man, Virginia 14-0, they look good, and then they don't score again, and they keep blowing. They throw a pick in the end zone, and then I don't even know. Oh, I was wrong. They've won 500 games. My bad. I was shortchanging them.
So Indiana is number 123 out of 131 in winning percentage. And they've won 0 national championships, so they're tied for 43rd. So I guess that tells us that 42 schools have claimed a national championship at some point. They've
Indiana's
only
the
won
43rd best program. No. Man, that's bad. 2 conference championships, one in 1945, one in 1967, and then 13 bowl games. Now, the Big Ten, to be fair, didn't play bowls where more teams can make a bowl like the other conferences. Because if Indiana had that, they would have made more back in the day. But man,
none of the Big Ten teams are at the very top of the list because they only had one team.
Bowl.
Yeah.
Why was that?
1975. Well, I think that the Big Ten just had a very academic standard that we're here to go to school and not play football. So if you don't win the conference, we don't need to participate in these bowl games, number one. Number two, they had a very kind of participation approach that I'm sure that that if you could win, let's say Michigan State, this happened to Michigan State in 1966. They won the Big Ten title the year before, won all their games, went to the Rose Bowl. Regardless, the next season, they would not allow the same team to go to the Rose Bowl.
I think I remember that.
So if you won a back-to-back Big Ten title, you wouldn't go to the Rose Bowl the second time. The second-place team would go to the Rose Bowl.
That's insane. That is so wild.
And then they changed that at some point, and Ohio State ripped off 4 consecutive Rose Bowls as soon as they changed that. And then the next quirk of sorts that annoyed me because I was 12 years old in 1981, and Ohio State and Iowa tied for the Big Ten championship, and they didn't play. So Iowa got to go to the Rose Bowl because Ohio State had been there more recently. That was their tiebreaker. So Ohio State missed out on a number of Rose Bowls because they tied Iowa. Well, Iowa got to go because Ohio State had been there more recently. Then they tied Wisconsin, and Wisconsin got to go because Ohio State had been there more recently. Then they tied somebody else. They got to go. Illinois, they get to go to the Rose Bowl.
That doesn't even make sense. That is just unbelievable. I mean, you see, though, those rules were crazy back then with the Big Ten, but you see how every conference is different, the history is different, and how it shaped the way that the conferences were. Now that you're adding all these different teams and all that, it's making it all inconspicuous. Like having it where the Big Ten history and the culture and the SEC and the Pac-12 or the Pac-10, all of them being the way that they were and the way that they operated made it unique, even if it was not accurate or it shouldn't have been the way that it was. Like that, it made it that way, made the history be that way.
Just to let you know, Jeffrey, there's somebody trying to call, but they've not been able to connect. So there's nobody waiting. So go ahead. I just wanted to note one other thing about that era that's really strange. Michigan fans will love this. Michigan, over the course of 4 years in the 1970s, they lost 3 games. So they went undefeated, 10-1, 10-1, 10-1. They never went to a bowl game in those 4 years that they were finishing like number 3 in the country because all 3 years they lost to Ohio State. They were undefeated, lost to Ohio State the last game of the year, didn't get to go to a bowl game. And then the other year they were undefeated. They tied Ohio State, and the Big Ten decided that Ohio State would go to the Rose Bowl. So yeah, Michigan had like this great run of football for 4 years in which they went like 40-3, and they didn't even go to a bowl game.
That is unbelievable. I mean, I just hearing stuff like that, it doesn't even make sense. Again, the rules were weird, but again, that's what it made the Big Ten the way the Big Ten was. Even if it wasn't right and it shouldn't have been that way, it's still really cool. That graph though with Indiana, all those losing seasons though, you have those little spikes. They had a few good seasons and all that losing. I mean, Tom Allen's now like the 5th or 6th winningest coach in Indiana football. I think he's tied for 6th right now. If he wins tomorrow, he'll be the 5th winningest coach in Indiana history or something like that. He'll be win 32. He's 31-41 right now, and he'll be the 5th winningest coach if he gets his 32nd win. It still cracks me up that Bill Mallory, the winningest coach, has a losing record. The winningest coach in Indiana history has a losing record.
That's
like,
great.
how do you do that? The winningest coach should be winning. Like, you should have a winning record, but no, the winningest coach has a losing record. It's unbelievable. I bet even Oregon State's winningest coach is a winning record.
Oh, I'm sure he does, because Dennis
Easily.
Erickson had a great run there, and so did Mike Riley. But the funny thing about that too is those coaches' records are even worse if you look at their conference record, because they won a ton of their games out of the conference. So their conference records are pretty bad.
Yeah, I don't even think Tom Allen's cracked 20 yet, 20 conference wins. I think he's at like 17. He's like 17-35. So he's basically only won like 30% of his conference games. It's unbelievable.
I was hard on Dave Doran of NC State at one point, and people couldn't understand why, and I produced a video. Now since then, he's put together 3 decent seasons, but at one point, okay, he was going into his 8th season at NC State, and he had won 37% of his conference games. Basically, the formula was go 3-5 or 4-4 in the conference. Really, 3-5, pretty much.
7-5, 3-5.
And win all your non-conference games against Richmond and William and Mary and East Carolina, and go 7-5 and go to a bowl game, or go 2-6 in the conference and win the 4 games and go 6-6 and go to a bowl game. Yeah, Tom Allen is 17-36 in the Big Ten.
That's it. 17. It was 17-35 until the Ohio State, because I remember seeing it before the season. It was 17-35. Yep. So it's terrible, and that's why, again, to reiterate for the millionth time, you're not what your record says you are. NC State going 7-5. 3-5 in the ACC is not impressive. I remember those years, because NC State would make a bowl and they would usually get beat pretty badly, especially if they were playing somebody good, because, I mean, you're not a good team if all you're beating is bad non-conference opponents and then 3 of the worst teams in your own conference. Like, even Indiana, like, if they beat 3 bad non-conference opponents and then they beat Rutgers, Michigan State if they're down, and Purdue or whatever, does that make them good? Probably not. I mean, you're not beating anybody significant. Man, that's bad. Look at that early stretch: 8-5, 3-5, 7-6, 3-5, 7-6, 3-5. That's insane.
Look at the conference record. So he's going to bowl games all those years, going 3-5, 3-5, 3-5, 6-2, 5-3, 1-7. 7-3, 6-2. So, like I said, the last few years, a little bit better. So he is, since 2020, he's 17, 25, 26, and 13. So he's still 38-44 in conference play.
Yeah, if Tom Allen was 38-44 in conference play, he'd be the best coach in Indiana history, because even Bill Mallory didn't do that. Like, again, it's insane. Like, Indiana is the funniest program to me ever, because the amount of losing. Rest in peace, Bill Mallory. He was an Indiana icon. That's all you could say. And his career was like 10 years, 10, 11, 12 years, something like that. Look at that. Look at those records. The best coach ever in history. His records are horrible. That was their last bowl win in 91 against Baylor in the Copper Bowl. They won 24-0. And then the end of his tenure wasn't great.
Yeah, that 6-2 year in 1987. They could have won the Big Ten championship and gone to the Rose Bowl. They played Michigan State late in the year, and they got whipped pretty well from what I remember. But they were playing for the Big Ten title, and Michigan State knocked them off, and they went to the Rose Bowl. And that's as close as they went. Other than that, they're finishing 10th, 9th, 6th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 3rd, 5-3, tied for 3rd, 6th, 4th, 6th, 11th, and 9th. Yeah, his Big Ten record, 39-65.
And like I said, winningest coach ever, and that is the record. Now the thing I'm confused, why didn't they? I don't remember, but why didn't they make a bowl in '94? That's 7-4 record. Did they have allegations or something?
Well, there were. I don't believe so. There were just a lot less bowl spots for one thing. Like there was no guarantee that you were going to make a bowl. Like you had to go 6-5 to be eligible for a bowl, but you could be 6-5, 7-4. I covered a Mississippi State team in 1997 that went 7-4. They just didn't get invited to a bowl game. Can you imagine? An SEC team, they're 7-4. They didn't get invited to a bowl game.
That is insane. Like now you got sometimes you're 5-7 and you can get in. I remember one year Minnesota was 5-7 and they made a bowl game. I was like, what? It was crazy. But yeah, I mean Anthony Thompson though, in the late 80s stretch, he was the reason they were that good. Anthony Thompson, one of the best running backs in Big Ten history. Maybe that's a little bit of a stretch, but he was really good and the best running back in Indiana history by far. Von Dunbar in 90 and 91 was good too, but nothing beat Anthony Thompson. He was fantastic. What blows my mind though is Antoine Randall though in the late 90s when Indiana had those weird helmets with the IU and the red. I can't stand those. I like the regular Indiana. It's weird, but Antoine Randall was insanely good. It's like I imagine him on this year's team. Like they wouldn't be a championship contender, obviously, but they'd be 9-3, 8-4. Because there's enough talent on this year's team with the way how good he was to be 8-4. Like the fact that those teams he had no O-line, there was no skill positions. The defense was giving up 45 a game. And now you got this year's defense, and you've got the skill Jalen Lucas next to him. Yeah, man, he would love to play for Indiana now because they're better. Like back in the late 90s, I don't even know how they got that guy. Maybe it's because he was just so small that no one would take him. And back then, quarterbacks didn't really run that much, but he was so good. And Indiana was so bad. And he never transferred, and he put up with that for 4 years. And he went 5-6 in his best season, putting up insane stats.
Yeah, that could have been a lot of things. That could have been either a grade issue, not that Indiana's not a great school, but maybe just for whatever reason, he had issues at other schools. That could be a size thing. Certainly coaches were more restrictive, I'll say, about size, cared more about size, and would shy away from smaller athletes. Another thing could be maybe he insisted on playing quarterback, and other schools just didn't see him as a quarterback and thought, no, you're going to come here and play wide receiver or you're not playing. And so he said, I want to play quarterback. You know, Randy Moss, I don't know, and I don't want to conjecture in any way that Antoine Randall L had any issues off the field because I don't remember, don't know. But, you know, Randy Moss, some people wonder, why did he end up at Marshall? Well, no, he went to Notre Dame. He got thrown out, had issues there. He went to Florida State. That didn't work out. Then he left. He went to Marshall. That's how he ended up at Marshall.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't think he did, not that I know of.
Yeah.
I think it probably was back in that era in his size because he was only like 5'10". And obviously, everyone remembers when he threw the touchdown pass in Super Bowl in 2007 for the Steelers. So that was his highlight of his NFL career. But, I mean, it just, for me, it's like just frustrating, though, with programs. It's not just Indiana, but it's other programs that could win, you know, in football. I understand you're not going to be good all the time because you're competing with all these other teams for the exact same players. You've got all the resources, but there's no reason why this program should be this bad in football. And this is coming from an unbiased perspective. This is not me being, Jeffrey's coming on here talking about Indiana and he wants them to win. No, this is just being completely honest. There's no reason they should be this bad. Their best coach has a losing record. It's insane.
So something you talked about earlier, Jeffrey, I think might be part of the answer. So I don't think there's anything inherently about people that grow up, were born in Indiana, grow up, that there's a DNA or a chromosome that makes them like basketball more than football. There's something in all of us that, sure, some of us, regardless of the success of our teams, we just like football better than the other sports, or just like baseball better than the other sports, or whatever we like. But most people like what they like because that's what is around them. That's what's surrounding them. So if for whatever reasons there was more resource given to basketball, or it was just, and I'm talking about a long, long time ago.
Yes, 40.
There were more resources given to basketball. Maybe there was an observation of the landscape to say, you know what, it's going to be tough for us to compete in football. We're already behind Michigan and Ohio State and all these teams. So it's going to be easier to find 3 good basketball players that can carry a team in the recruiting process. So why don't we put more focus? And so if you grow up in a state where, oh, the basketball is great, the football sucks, so nobody cares about the football because we're into basketball, then even if you like the game of football, then the school's going to respond to that fervor and that attention and that passion going all toward basketball and be like, we're just here to make some money in playing football in the Big Ten. And it doesn't really, we don't want to be embarrassing, but if we are, that's fine, because November's coming and we're going to start playing basketball and people are going to forget about it because we're going to start to dominate in basketball. So,
and I think the big thing too is the fact that back then football didn't make as much money. You didn't have these 100,000, people stadiums. You didn't have all these TV contracts, 10 million people watching these games. So it's like the basketball versus football money gap was probably a lot closer. So in Indiana back then was like deciding what we're going to be. Are we going to be a basketball or a football school? They're like, well, Notre Dame's already good in football. They've won all these titles. They're taking the recruits. Like you said, Ohio State, Michigan were already great, blah, blah, blah. So Indiana was like, yeah, we'll be good in basketball. And it makes about the same. And now that's clearly not the case. I mean, the money gap between the two sports is so wide. And the money gap between basketball and the rest of the sports is so wide that it's like, I bet Indiana, like the people in charge, like if there's people that are still alive that were making those decisions 50, 60 years ago, if there's any of them still alive, hopefully they are. But they're probably, man, I wish we had tried harder in football because, man, the money is just, it's there. I mean, you make so much money in football. Like you mentioned with Ohio State, the amount of people that watch Ohio State, even when they play bad teams, I mean, that's just money right there. Insane amount of money. Like even Texas, these bad, teams have been bad. Texas never really was bad, but when they were down more, they still get a lot of views. And like Indiana maybe didn't have to be that level, but if they were a, Minnesota level program throughout history, the way Minnesota is like now, like an 8-4 type of program, that does wonders for you. And it's like they didn't do that, and they never did, even when they had blips in the past with George Taliaferro in the 40s, Anthony Thompson in the 80s. They had moments, but they never seized those opportunities to get better.
So what's incredible is that when we have our guy, Tony Altimore, come on here and bring all the stats, what stuck in my mind, among other things, and when it comes to revenue this past football season, and so men's basketball is part of this equation, but he says it's only about 15%, most of it's football, that Ohio State made more money than anybody last year, $137 million profit. Then Texas was number 2. And I don't remember checking to see where Indiana was, but let's say they made, because Florida State only made like, and when I say only, like 50 million, I say only because Ohio State made 137 million and Michigan was like 122 and Texas was 134. And that's with schools like Indiana making the same amount of money in television. In television, Ohio State and Indiana make exactly the same amount of money. So that's all the difference that Ohio State can make in selling merchandise, tickets at the stadium, all of that they can make extra. Now, if Ohio State, Michigan wanted to play hardball with the Big Ten, they could go in and do something similar to what the Florida State athletic director did with the ACC a couple months ago and go in and say, no. We shouldn't all be getting the same television distribution because that's not 6.6 million people watched Ohio State play Maryland. Like I was having a conversation with somebody and they were saying something about they were talking about, it was Corey and I were having this conversation. I had to bring to light because he just kind of sloughed off Maryland. I said, no. It doesn't matter who Ohio State's playing. I said the highest rated game on the Big Ten Network, and the Big Ten Network showed a lot of important Western Division games that factored into the title, Purdue, Minnesota, Illinois, Purdue, those kind of games. When Ohio State played Rutgers, that was by far the highest rated game on the Big Ten Network last year. And it was the only time the entire season that a Big Ten Network game outrated an ESPN game head to head.
That's insane.
So Ohio State could go to the Big and Michigan, and it's a sliding scale, then Penn State, then Wisconsin or whoever. Say, no, go to the numbers, and we want to be paid not 1/14th. We want to be paid the percentage that we bring in on this TV contract. And then you talk about.
Oh, the gap would widen so much. It wouldn't even be fun to watch anymore. I mean, it'd be like Ohio State would have to bring in the fourth stringers and they could still beat Indiana by 50. It would be terrible if they did that. And to your point, when you rob Ohio State Rutgers on the Big Ten Network, like even though that 3:30 window was really bad, Ohio State Indiana had insane viewers. It just did because it was like the game. Okay, it's Ohio State. They're playing this terrible Big Ten program, but we're still going to watch it. And the game was relatively close enough for people to continue to keep an eye on it throughout the third and fourth quarter. So I appreciate that, Ferris, really do. Even though I know a lot of people do not care about Indiana or the topics thereof, but I do really appreciate that.
Everybody, you can catch Jeffrey on his YouTube channel. We should drop the link in what is the best way for me to find it? I'm subscribed. I am officially subscribed, but it's hard for me to find these things. So
my channel's Only Talk Sports.
Only Talk Sports. So we're going to grab the link and we're going to drop it in the chat so everybody can find it. Oh, you won over 1,000 subscribers. Good. Excellent.
Thank you. I'm past it, I think, a couple months ago. I appreciate that.
That's tremendous.
We got to get Mark to 100,000. Let's everybody keep getting more. Thank you.
That's awesome. So we'll get some other subscribers. You've been talking, let's see, Pitt, West Virginia, and Minnesota, North Carolina preview, and LSU, Mississippi State. Some good stuff there. Excellent.
Yeah, it's been a long week, but it's worth it talking college football. I have a lot of fun doing it. Like, there's something about college football that, like, I enjoy because I talked all through college basketball season, talking about, the bowl, not bowl games, it's football, but the NCAA tournament and stuff like that. But there's just something about football, like the energy around it. It just, there's more fans, like the fan base, the chatter's bigger. It's insane. Like, you have like a few schools in basketball, your Carolinas, Kentucky's, Dukes, Indiana's, but in football, even the mid-tier, like we're debating Maryland. It's just like teams like it seems like more people care in football, even the bad fan base, like the bad teams and the teams with less fan base. There's no bad fan base, but lower fan base. It's just really cool to talk about. It's definitely been a enjoyable first couple weeks of the season, but thanks for the shout out. I really appreciate it.
So we've dropped Jeffrey's link there in the chat. So check out his channel. The thing that I can't figure out is, I'm running a business here, but at the same time, I want to have fun and I want to do what I want to do. So I would drop like Virginia Tech Rutgers previews if that's what people wanted to see. But that stuff just tanks. And what I can't figure out is that just going to tank regardless? Mm-hmm. Or do those fan bases, they haven't found me and they're not on this channel. So maybe I should produce those to try to eventually bring in those fan bases because, we joke about Rutgers. They don't have any fans. Virginia, not Virginia Tech. We wouldn't put them in that class, but Rutgers, Indiana, Northwestern, Stanford, they don't have any fans. Well, they do actually have fans and they have a fairly significant amount of fans. Nobody's at the Stanford football game, but for as awful as they were last year, if you look at their TV numbers, they got a couple million people watching them most games last year. So
one of them's me.
there's probably 500,000 to 1 million people, maybe more than that, that would watch Stanford analysis, whether they're actually Stanford fans or just nerds like you and I who will just watch analysis on every college football team. But I just haven't found those people. So my views on my videos just they spike. They're all over they just bounce from 10,000 to 500. They're all over the place because if I talk about teams that I want to talk about, nobody's watching those videos. So I kind of waste my time on some of these teams that nobody wants to hear about.
Yeah, I completely agree. And for me, like, completely different boat, but it's the same thing. I have a lot of up and down too because of the fact, especially last year when I was starting out at first, I was doing like small games, big games, and you would get this rare one out of nowhere. Like I'm not expecting like a small game, like especially like the American, like if it's UCF or something, that would just do insanely good. I'm like, yay. And then I do them again, and then there's nothing. I'm like, where'd you go? Like, you not care anymore? It's just YouTube's interesting anyway. The algorithm's weird. There's so many people talking about sports, and like you just go through and you put in a game and there's like 25, 30, 40 people doing videos on games. I mean, there's a lot of people doing it. And I think sometimes you just get lucky. Sometimes you don't. And I mean, like you said, there's fans of every team. I mean, you could talk about Grambling playing, some small team, whatever's in Grambling's conference. And there's people that go to those games. There's people that are at those universities, going to school, but you just don't, you're not going to get the views like you do Texas, Bama or anything like that.
If I just cared about clicks, and maybe I should, there's two things I would do automatically. Number one is I would come up with some kind of realignment take every day. And I would just post a video on realignment. I'd make something stupid up and just throw it out there, or grab some comment that somebody made on Twitter and talk about realignment every day. The other thing I would do is I would just go on Ohio State and Michigan message boards, and I would produce another video every day. I would just about Ohio State and Michigan every day. And I bet I would get a lot more views just riling up those two fan bases.
Yeah, and the thing is for me, and I don't get super upset because I just enjoy, like, I'm glad that there's so many people talking sports, on YouTube and other platforms. I'm glad that there's so many people doing their own style. But, like, for me, like, when I watch you, I started watching you about 3 years ago, probably around mid-2020, and I was like, man, this guy's awesome. And you had, like, 20-something thousand subs at the time, and I'm like, how? Like, and obviously I've been watching YouTube probably for the last 7 years or so. So I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of big channels that I don't like. I mean, like, they're just, their content is not for me. Cause I like being real, and I know that term can be dissected. Oh, I'm not a realist, but I like when people just tell it the way it should be, the way it is. And I watched you and I'm like, yes, Mark Rogers is giving content the way it's supposed to be. It's not, it's just sports talk, and it's not over the top. It's not exaggerative. I mean, some people, that's what they do. Like you said, realignment. Like I'll see these crazy videos where people are like, oh, can Tulane save the ACC or the Pac-12 or whatever? And I'm just like, and there's like thousands and thousands of views. And then I watch it and I'm like, okay. And I didn't watch it because I care, because I'm like, yeah, it's not going to happen. But I'm like, Mark is so much better. And yet he's got less views than this. And I'm like, yeah, you're not what your record says you are, and you're also not how many subs you have is how good you are. You can have 2 subs and you could be making great content. Either someone doesn't know you yet, or there's just so much comments for what you're doing, or you're producing it in a way that doesn't flash. People like the flash or the crazy ideas and stuff that won't ever happen. I remember a YouTube video like 5-6 years ago where there was a roller coaster or whatever, and it had like the part where people were riding in, and they clipped the part of the loop out, and it looked like they were in air, and it had like 60 million views. And I swear one of my family members told me, they were like, is that real? And I'm like, you really think that's real? And we watched the video, gave it one of the 60 million views, and lo and behold, look at this roller coaster. It's really cool, but it did not have the part with the no loop, or there's nothing there, and the people are just gliding across thin air and get to the other side of the rail. I mean, it just blew my mind. So, yeah, sometimes things get views that just shouldn't, but they do. And I know this has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but it's
Yeah,
just
it makes
funny.
me think that I should, the whole YouTube thing. Like, I watched a video the other day where somebody was diagnosing thumbnails, how to build thumbnails. And some of these YouTube creators are insane, but they're effective because they will make a video and they will build like 50 thumbnails and they'll analyze them and they'll run them through all these metrics to figure out which one's going to be. And they showed these like 40 thumbnails and said, try to even distinguish the difference. Like, I couldn't even figure out the difference between they look so similar,
Like
but
an
they started
inch.
to point out that the shading on this one was just slightly different and the lettering was just slightly angled, and that's going to do this. And they put them against heat maps and all this stuff to determine what's going to catch people's eyes. And so I don't necessarily build the best thumbnails. I don't come up with the best titles and all that sort of thing. I just try to produce the best content, but I do need to get better at those things to keep this thing going. That's for sure. But yeah, I thought maybe I should start a side channel to do all the dumb things that would draw and go viral that could support this channel, like showing, squirrels and cats and whatever people like to watch. People watch animals all day.
Yeah, I call my channel Only Talk Sports, which is kind of a catch-22 because I only talk sports. But yeah, there's so many things I would just love to talk about sometimes. Like, I think I slipped in a Princess Diaries reference, or Princess Bride, actually. That's it, Princess Bride reference that Tim got, because I love watching older movies or whatever. And it's like, again, it's movies, but it's like I could talk about it, junk, because I love talking about stuff like that. That's why whenever someone's bringing up fast food restaurants in the chat, like what do you like better, Mark? What kind of fries? Or I love that stuff, but I have to create another channel for that, like you said as well. But yeah, I mean, again, it's interesting. YouTube is interesting, and you just have to, like you told me a long time ago, be yourself. Because I was talking to you about, because I think Uncle Lou called in, and I was like, people love that guy because it's Uncle Lou, and he's like, Tennessee's terrible. I don't like Tennessee. And I told you, I was like, I could just be like, Tennessee stinks. I can't stand the Volunteers, and just everybody be like, man, I love this kid. Me sub him, and he's great. And like, no, I'm just like, Tennessee's great, Alabama's great, Indiana's great, and then everybody's like, man, I like it, but it's boring. And I'm like, it might be boring, but at least I'm not trashing no one's team. I'm being nice and friendly, and it is what it is. That's just the way YouTube is. Sometimes irritating somebody is going to make the 99% of the other people super happy. And you're going to benefit in the long run, but it's not yourself. It's not my nature to do that. So I just like telling the facts.
I am certainly not the typical YouTuber, and I have not cracked the code, and I probably don't go about this the right way, but that's fine. I've got to be true to myself. So we're not going to just come up with some kind of shtick. But yeah, I've told my friends, every friend that I have that has an animal, I've told them, just take video of it. Just take video of it and post it. People love watching animals. They'll watch animals all day.
I remember early YouTube, the cat videos thing. Like, you'd watch any late 2000s, early 2010s kids movie, and it had some cat thing referenced from the YouTube or whatever. It's like, look at the cat, it's so cute. I'm like, how is this getting views? Like, yes, it's cute, but I'm not gonna watch. Like, what? It was crazy. I think when you mentioned the thumbnails too, that is so true, because I like looking at the thumbnails, watching tons of people's thumbnails, and I don't want to copy no one's thumbnails. So I try to be as original as possible, but it's hard because there's so many people doing it. So there's so many different type of thumbnails. To your point, I've watched videos where so many people have said that just a little bit of a change on the thumbnail makes a difference. And I'm like, how? It's like, so if I put the question mark over here, it's not going to do as well if I put the question mark over here, because it's coming like near where his mouth is or something, where it's like, it looks like he's saying a question versus it's like, how does this make a difference? For me, it's like, it's the same thing. It's the same. Like, for me, if I'm scrolling through YouTube and I see that thumbnail, I'm like, I'm going to watch that. But no, it's like, oh, if you put it over here, it's going to get a lot more views. So I know what you're talking about. I've seen that, but I don't know the code either. I don't get it. I've had people ask me, like, I'm an expert. How do you help? Like, how I got 100 subs, you got more, blah, blah, blah. what do you do to help me out? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know the rules. I don't know what I'm even supposed to put my videos without getting demonetized. Like, I don't get anything. I'm just making videos.
People ask me for my direction all the time and my advice, and I tell them I'm really not the guy to go to because most of your channels have gained subscribers and views far quicker than mine did. Now, speaking of thumbnails, this was hilarious. And as soon as I say this, I'm going to bring Tim Prangley in because he's got something to contribute here with you on the line. But this was funny. This was about 2 or 3 weeks ago. I'm on the Oklahoma channel, and most of our live shows will get edited into shorter clips. So David Stone, big defensive tackle, #1 rated in the country. He was expected to announce to go to Oklahoma. Well, this was anticipated, but it wasn't a done deal until he made his commitment. And the guy that helps us with the editing and the thumbnails accidentally didn't put a question mark in. So just an innocent accident. So instead of David Stone commits question mark, that's what I sent. We had just a slight miscommunication. So of course, people can't be reasonable. They can't be kind. They can't show a little bit of grace and understand that there was a mistake. I got obliterated about this is clickbait. You're lying to us. I got all these unsubscribe. You did this, do this. So as soon as I saw that, because I saw that thumbnail, I changed it, but still I already had 100 comments just blasting me for this. So that pissed me off. So I immediately went live. And I said, if you've been watching for a couple days or a couple weeks, I can understand your response. Okay, that's fine. You don't know me. You don't know the content that we do. But for anybody that's been watching for any length of time, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Do I put up clickbait videos?
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought that because I've been watching for 3 years.
Yes. What is my track record? What is my track record? We couldn't have even surmised that we'll give Mark the benefit of the doubt that there might have been a mistake made. He only produces like 100 videos a day, that there might have been a mistake, might have been a typo. Like, I was just like, are you kidding me? Like,
I had something happen to me like that, but it wasn't with a thumbnail. One time I saw that Brian Ferentz was at Iowa State. It was on Wikipedia. It was on Sporting News. It was all over the place. It happened like this past offseason. It was like in December. I'm serious that this happens all over the place. And I was like, wow, I got to talk about that. So I'm like, Iowa's going to be better now. They're going to improve and all that. And then someone told me in my comment section, they were like, you do know he's still at Iowa, right? And I went back and it's like, the rumors are false. And I'm like, it was on the Sporting News. What are you talking about? Like, I couldn't believe it. I was like, and then everyone was like, I'm telling lies. I'm like, I'm not. I thought it was true.
When I went live the other night with the Mel Tucker story, you probably remember because I think you were on with us late Saturday night last week, and
you were laughing so hard about that.
People were starting to put the Mel Tucker story, and then I went live the next day, and even the next day, Sunday afternoon, ESPN and another major service, I don't remember which one, had headlines that said Mel Tucker fired. And so I didn't know which way to go because I saw Mel Tucker fired. I saw just suspended, and the time releases on the stories were inconsistent. So I came on here and some people were like, he didn't get fired. And I'm saying, I'm not reporting that he got fired. I'm just saying it's reported. And then ESPN retracted that. And
I did the same thing. I made a video that day in the early Sunday afternoon, Mel Tucker fired. And then what happened? I saw the suspended news and I'm like, oops, well, I already made it.
Yeah. So, we got Tim here.
What's up, guys?
This is a pleasant surprise.
What's up? Well, I've been working all night on that phone thing I was talking to you about. So,
man,
I want to see if we can get actual live call. You want to give it a shot?
So here's the deal, everyone. While Tim's working on this, we used to take traditional phone calls. We had a phone system. We
called in one time to that.
You did that one time. And actually, that's the way to do it. And for a number of reasons, it just is easier for many people that don't want to go through the process of downloading StreamYard and going through the verification process. And you just make a phone call. And we don't know your phone number. There's a buffer system. So that's protected. But But my phone system went down a couple of years ago, and I started taking StreamYard calls, and people, number one, could come on camera, number one. Number two, we had a number of people comment immediately and say, well, we can hear these calls so much better through StreamYard. So I decided, you know what? We're paying X number of dollars for this phone line, so forget it. But as Tim has discovered on the USC channel as well, and we have discovered here, we do want to make it more accessible for more people to call, because we want to open this up to a larger fan base.
And we actually have a call, Mark. Do you want to take it right now?
Absolutely. Let's take it.
Hello, you should be on live.
Hey, Tim, how you doing?
Look at that. How we doing? Jeffrey, say something really quick.
We doing?
Hi, how you doing?
Right, good stuff. I think it's going to work, you guys. So are we talking SEC again, or what's going on?
We can talk about whatever you guys would like to talk about. But that's phenomenal. That's great. So when are we going to put this into use?
Whenever you'd like. It's so without going into too much detail. Wait, I'm not supposed to give out that's my personal cell phone number. I'm not supposed to do that? No, I'm kidding. It's not my number. But it's two phone lines. One's an 888 number, and there's a 213 number. And yeah, up to 3. So here's the thing. It says up to 3 users, but if we do it like web-based like this, it could be for whatever the channels are. So it'll be fine. Just 2 phone numbers. So yeah, it's pretty basic. I'll go to the details with you later on. But Daryl, how you doing? Say something again. I want to hear how clear it is.
Yeah, I'm doing good, Tim. How is USC going to this week without the bye? Do you think they can beat the bye?
I think they might beat the bye. Yeah. What it's SC minus, I think 11 for the bye. Isn't that what it is?
Something like that.
My question is you got a little upset earlier when we were talking about when Mark made a couple comments about Kentucky. Did you just clear that up?
He did struggle a
I
little
don't think
bit.
we talked about Kentucky much. I think we talked about the SEC.
We
No, but
had
you were
quite
you
a
made a couple
discussion about
comments
the SEC. Yeah.
Teams like them or something like that, and you were making that comment in the chat. I thought.
Oh yeah, he was putting Kentucky in the lesser group, but just completely casting us aside, like we're the untouchables, like with the Missouris, the South Carolinas, the Vanderbilt. We don't matter. And he kind of
South
did that
Carolina is better than
conversation,
Kentucky
saying
right now.
Auburn versus Cal. Who
Maybe.
cares? It doesn't impact the playoff race. All that fun stuff.
So Kentucky is going to be squarely in the top half of the SEC this year.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, with the way the SEC teams have been playing.
I'm hearing a little cutout. You guys hear a little cutout on the phone?
Yes. Not so much cut out on the phone, but when Daryl was talking and Jeffrey talking at the same time, Jeffrey's audio went really low. There was overlap, but it kind of Daryl's took precedence. It was higher in volume.
Landlines are better.
I'm not sure about that.
I can barely hear Jeffrey.
Okay.
Like I can hear Tim Mark way more than Jeffrey. Jeffrey sounds like he's on the completely opposite side of the room, to put in an analogy.
All right, hold on. Let me turn that up a bit. Okay. Say something again, Jeffrey.
Can you hear me now?
It's getting better.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right. Well, yeah, it's great. So it's working, but I'm hoping if someone else could call in right now, I can see it so I could check the call queue because this thing has a call queue. I want to see if that would work. I don't know if anyone else is trying to call from the chat, but
Let me ask Jeffrey about his Indiana Hoosiers. Jeffrey, your Indiana Hoosiers 10 underdogs against the Louisville Cardinals. Are you hoping to at least keep it close, or do you expect to win?
I am predicting a 28-24 win for Indiana over Louisville. And I've had a lot of people say that I'm not completely crazy, and I've had other people say that I've lost my mind. So it depends on perspective. I think a lot of people have not really paid attention to Indiana this season and can tell that their defense is much improved.
Sorry, Tim. Put that back up. My bad.
well, oh, the phone line.
No, I got it. There we go.
I'll just give you Slap Happy a fight on for the super sticker. Indiana, huh, Jeffrey?
Yeah, the defense has improved, I think, by a lot. Last year and the year before was terrible. And I feel like that their offense, while young with Taven Jackson, has weapons with Jalen Lucas, Cam Camper. I think they can pull off a upset. It is an upset. I'm not going to say that the two teams are on equal footing. Louisville's better. They have more talent overall. And Jeff Brom has a great record against Tom Allen at 4-1, but I'm picking Indiana to win. We'll see, though.
Tim, 9 a.m. Pacific time. Make sure you're up for the Indiana-Louisville kickoff because you'll want to scout Indiana because I know that they're at the top of your priority list in scouting the Big Ten for USC in 24.
Best game of the window.
You never know. We might meet them in a bowl game sometime this year. Watch out for those Hoosiers. Yeah, listen, I got to get ready for the Big Ten. I was just talking to Tony Altomare when I was setting this phone thing up, and we're already making plans for New York and going to DC to watch Maryland play, and then Midwest for sure. As long as it's in September, I don't care. I'm not spending my hard-earned money. No offense, Midwest. I love all of you. I'm not spending my money. I've been to unfortunately, it's usually a funeral, but I've been to Michigan many times in the middle of December and January. Well, it won't be January, but in December and late November, I'm staying clear of Michigan then.
Yeah, the weather conditions get a lot worse. Yeah, Ohio State fans remember that Michigan game with the snow. It was kind of snowing a little bit, and the throwing game was not working very well.
Well, I will attest to this. Because I was a California kid. I wanted to see snow, right? And I'm like, I woke everyone up. Like it's like 5 a.m. I woke everyone up. I'm probably about 12 or 13. And then when it gets up, it's snowing. They went outside. It's like a snow flurry. But for me, I thought it was like snow. Like that's nothing. It's gonna melt before it even gets on the ground.
It snowed like 4 times where I live in my life, and it's very small. Like I've had like an inch once, and it was like the biggest snowstorm ever. And like an hour from where I live, it snows a lot more, so it's kind of crazy.
Ohio State fans complain about that snow game in Ann Arbor hurting the passing game, and C.J. Stroud still threw for 400 yards in that game. So
I know it's like I remember the fans and they're like the passing game wasn't working because they were expecting 500 yards and more touchdowns. It's like I remember that it wasn't bad, but it was terrible. The snow wasn't even that severe too. It's kind of like the Ohio State Northwestern game. I remember Ohio State fans, the wind it was affecting their play, and maybe it was a lot more than the snow possibly. I don't know, but it just sometimes. I love when the big fan bases make excuses about things to make it where like, oh, we're not beatable by these teams at all. Like there's no the weather was the problem. It's not us.
I can't wait to see how this league's going to be structured and how the schedule format is going to lay out.
Yeah, those teams on the West Coast.
I'm curious about is how.
What, DeReal?
Sorry, I was going to say that's something I'm curious about is how is the guy that made the schedule, what do you think is he doing? When he saw the 2 more teams were added, I felt sorry for those schedule makers. They were in the lab thinking of all the schedule matchups, the hypotheticals, and all their work to be thrown away.
Well, if they are hiring out for that, then that's a good thing for them. That just gives them more work, and they can charge higher prices for the Big Ten for their consulting work.
Yeah. Tim, I heard you wanted to know about what the Big Ten is like. How's your meteorological skills?
Next to 0. Why?
Sure, you can read a forecast online.
They talk about the weather a lot. So, you got to be an expert in all the rain, the snow, the winds being loud, and all that type of stuff. So, all they seem to want to talk about.
I've been there being Grand Rapids, Michigan, enough to know that it's not that it's bad, but it's not as bad as people make it seem in October, November. I'm just saying I don't want to go there when it's cold, rainy, windy. It's not gonna be frozen. It might be cold, but I mean it's not always just like sheets of ice and icicles and snow in November.
It's also the distance. It's not even just about the weather. It's just the distance itself. Like UCF traveling to play Boise State. Like, even though that was a long trip in the non-conference, UCF's going to be playing at Arizona, and it's going to be a conference game. Arizona's going to be playing at UCF as a conference game. USC at Rutgers is a conference game. The distance makes a difference too. And granted, the planes, all that stuff's going to be, in great shape and all that. They're going to be taking care of everything, blah, blah, blah. But it's still going to be hard on them to make those long trips, especially several times in, a couple weeks, few weeks, month, whatever.
I'm not that worried about that end of it. Hey, guys, is it beeping right now? You hear the beep?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's a problem.
Yes.
All right. Well, let me see what happens if I bring our call in. Hold on. Oh, yeah, so I can't do that either. All right, well, that's something we got to figure out. So it doesn't do a true call queue then, apparently, because I'm looking at, there is a person waiting on call, which is calling in. So sorry, that person just tried calling in from Nevada. My bad. But that is disappointing.
I can say the first time that I called in on when you had the call in, the landline back over a year and a half ago, it was the coolest thing in the world. It's the first time I'd ever done that in my life. And I heard that you're in the waiting room of the Voice of College Football and all that. And like when you hear the beep, you'll be able to talk. Like I was just so excited for that. Because like I said, I probably watched it for a year and a half because I watched you and just saw how, the way that you talk with people and how you're always were fair, even if the people were giving you insane takes. I'm like, man, he is so cool. Like, he's probably going to be like, why am I talking about Indiana and stuff? But like, he's not going to think I'm crazy. So when I came in and talked, I was like, you know what? My family likes Alabama, and I do like Alabama a lot, but there's already been 3 people that have called in after the beep happened. And, and I was like, I'm going to talk about some Indiana. And you're like, Indiana? I was like, yeah, and I live in North Carolina too and like the Tar, so it's weird. I know. Like, I like Carolina, I like Alabama, but Indiana's the shtick when I come on here because no one else does it. So it was great. But talking to you that first time on the landline was a different experience than the StreamYard. It was something else. Pretty cool. Talking face to face, cool too.
I wanted to tell Tim, whenever you put me on live, I didn't get a beep or any indication that I went from offline to online.
Say again.
I didn't have any indication from when I was in the back room to the main stage. So you know how phone systems, they'll have a beep or something like that. They'll make a noise to say you're online.
Uh-huh.
I didn't have that. Literally the first words I knew when I was live was when you said, I think you're live.
Yeah, well, so that's I literally signed up for this. I haven't set anything up, so there's like bells and whistles I got to figure out. Like for instance, the one. Now here's the thing I don't know. It's forwarding it to my cell phone, and I'm wondering if that was a phone call for me from my phone or through the phone system because it didn't show up. I got a little. It's hard to show you guys, but I mean I've got a dashboard showing the call, like your call that came in, but there wasn't one that popped up. So again, now I'm wondering about a couple of things. So
I got you.
This is what's love about live,
you
live shows. This is always fun. When you walk on.
We work this out live. That's funny. So you're saying, Tim, that we're going to have to figure out if we're getting a personal call versus whether we're getting.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, the way it's set up is so that it's actually calling and forwarding a call to me, which is like that's how it's set up. Now I know that you can. I was looking at thing. You can have it to where on your phone you just turn off your you turn off your call. So you're not gonna be able to receive calls though if you do that. You could turn off so where your phone's not going to pick up your cell phone actual calls, and I think that's probably what you have to do.
Okay,
I think that's the step. But anyway, cool, you guys. Yeah, I just wanted to give it a run, take a look at it. But Mikey just tried calling in, and then Mike, I didn't get an answer. Did it go to a voicemail, Mikey? But anyway, yeah, good stuff.
Glad I could help you out, Tim.
I really appreciate it, Daryl. I knew I could
Thanks,
count on
Daryl.
you and Mikey. I appreciate both of you guys. Got Mikey calling in again, I think. Oh no, we got Kelly. We got someone calling in. Hold on a second. Hello, you're live. Hello. Uh-oh. Yeah, hi. How you doing?
I'm calling the Voice of College Football.
Yes, you are. You're on with Mark Rogers and Jeffrey.
Okay, I turned my sound off so I wouldn't get any feedback.
Yeah, that's
Hey,
perfect.
this is Greg Stewart in Michigan. This is my first call.
Well, thanks for calling in. You're the second caller all time on this new phone line.
We were just testing this out, so we appreciate you being patient with us. So who is this again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, if you can hear me, Mark, this is Greg Stewart from Michigan.
Excellent. Thanks, Greg. Great to hear from you.
Hey, one question I have, I guess, is how can you enjoy MAC football for the Big Ten? They've got 3 games this weekend against, Michigan, Iowa, and Notre Dame. There's almost no expectations that they're going to have any kind of competition at all in any of those games.
Yes.
And most
So
people
watch
won't
other
watch
games.
them.
So either watch other games. You're a Michigan fan, correct?
Yeah, I'm going to be at the big house, and I'm going to try to decide how I'm going to remind myself this is an enjoyable thing to do.
I think if you love your team, you're going to be happy if you're up 50-0.
Yeah, it all depends, Gregory,
Yeah,
on why you watch football.
the games have really been underwhelming in terms of enjoying the game when you're at the game.
So,
and that was East Carolina was supposed to be a good team. They were the best team we played so far.
Whilst Holton Aylor, CJ Johnson, Keaton Mitchell, if that was last year's ECU team, that'd have been a better game. ECU's a lot worse. They lost to Marshall by 3 scores.
This has been a topic before, but I just really, the MAC is going to have a hard time, especially if they get bumped off TV.
Well, that's
And
why
I
they
just really don't.
the Tuesday, Wednesday scenario on television is to take advantage of playing when other teams aren't.
I always watch the action on Tuesday and Wednesday. Right. I mean, it might not be great football, but it's still entertaining. It's football.
Well, that's the thing is, if you're a season ticket holder of any of these teams and you only have 2 Saturdays in the fall to enjoy a game at home, that's not great. It's not great for the fans, but I don't really think the game revolves around the fans these days. In terms of, it's the fans watching TV, not the fans at the game.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Because there's more money to
One
be
other
made
question, just absolutely. I mean, no one, Michigan games used to be 1 o'clock on Saturday back in the Canham era, and those days are gone forever for sure. Because the game revolves, there have been games at 11 o'clock in the morning, and that's not great for fans when you're going to the game. And I have a 2-hour drive when I go to Ann Arbor. So the other question I have while I'm on for my inaugural call is, do Ohio State fans feel bad about throwing CJ Stroud under the bus?
So that would be some Ohio State fans. And when you say throwing him under the bus, meaning early in his career, saying that he should be benched, or do you mean after all was said and done because he did not win a Big Ten championship or beat Michigan?
Well, I think after he went to the pros, there was I think some of what you just said is true. He didn't beat Michigan, although certainly was very competitive. It wasn't like he lost the game on his own merits. I just think it's sad, you've got these new, Ohio State's rolled out quarterback after quarterback, and they've done all real well. I think CJ Stroud is a pro quarterback. He'll do fine.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, playing for the Texans last I knew. But since you're an Ohio State fan, I think that's kind of, there was a while where Michigan had a series of really good quarterbacks, and then there was a drop off.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard to deal with when you're used to a certain level of talent being there at that position.
I think based on the feedback that I receive on this channel and have for a number of years, and I'm speaking in generalities, of course, everybody's different, but generally, I don't believe college fans care how their players perform in the NFL, except for the draft status of those players, so that they can brag about, okay, we've had this many draftees, we've had this many first rounders, we've been able to say that. But once they go off to the pros, sure, there are Michigan fans that brag about Tom Brady being the greatest quarterback of all time, of course. But I think largely most college football fans completely detach or reasonably detach from those players once they go to the NFL, except for to use them as metrics to prove how good their program is in determining or producing NFL players.
No, that's a point well taken. I guess the one thing, I mean, there have been, once Buckeyes come to the NFL, it's kind of, you cheer for them because, they're being paid the big bucks to play on the largest stage. And I could think of examples, but the number of Steelers that were Buckeyes I've rooted for. I'm not a Detroit fan. I'm not a Lions fan. And so the sudden wave of success for Lions football, for over 50 years is I'm not going to be a bandwagon fan. But
you're a Steelers fan.
Anyway, it's just fun to test out your phone system.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
I'm a
one
Steelers.
other thing, I just wanted to clarify something. You're a Steelers fan?
That's correct.
Okay. So there's a certain Ohio State wide receiver that pulled in a very important catch to win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that play.
Yeah. When you take
whether he had his toes down or not.
Oh, yeah. When you take in the aspect of the trajectory of the pass and how impossible that throw and catch was, it's one of the remarkable plays in NFL history. Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for calling.
Ben Roethlisberger, who was a MAC quarterback, and probably one of the top MAC quarterbacks of all time, I would guess. He brought a physical nature to that position that hadn't really existed in the NFL and probably doesn't now.
Yeah.
But anyway, I
few
appreciate you having me on, and
yeah.
And hopefully, I wanted to come on and have some intelligence in my calls. Hopefully, I achieved that.
Absolutely.
And, wonderful to talk to you two.
Call back anytime, sir. We
You
appreciate
guys
it.
have a good night.
You too.
Bye-bye.
See, that's the goal, Mark, to get those calls like that. We can get out of our little
Yeah.
ecosystem and get some
people
great new callers. That was a great call.
That was a
Absolutely
great call. And who otherwise would not have called. Did it appear as though he was a little delayed?
Possibly.
It seemed it.
Oh, really? Okay.
It seemed like it. Maybe he just thought a couple seconds before he responded. I don't know. It just felt delayed, like we were talking over each other as opposed to real.
Interesting.
I think something interesting about what he brought up with the NFL is the fact that for me, I pay attention to, I watch all of the Indiana players that are in the NFL, Bama, Carolina, teams that I like more, even though I'm not super biased, but I do pay attention to. I know some people, it doesn't matter, but I do watch the NFL and, college football as well. But I think for me, what's more impressive, and a lot of people don't care about this, but like Alabama, for example, you have all of, the 5 stars that come in, and most of those guys go pro. Not all of them. Some don't pan out, but they mostly go pro. But for someone like me, like with Indiana, you have a Micah McFadden, who was a 2-star recruit, the lowest rated player in Indiana's 2018 recruiting class, and he's in the NFL as a starting middle linebacker for the New York Giants. That's cool to me when a player that was a 2-star, low 3-star recruit's in the pros. Not saying that makes Tom Allen a fantastic coach better than Saban, because that's not obviously what I'm saying, but it's cool when that happens. And for a lot of coaches that can develop guys, not saying Tom Allen again directly impacted that, but when players like that have success, I think it's a lot more awesome than it is with some of the top 5-star recruits that you're expecting to go pro.
I keep forgetting we're trying to get calls in here, and I keep flipping the banner just because out of habit. That's what I'm used to doing.
Mm-hmm.
Tim, do you have any pride in USC players having success in the NFL?
There's a couple of guys from my little school that's done okay in the NFL lately. I'm really happy with the receivers. Amon-Ra St. Brown had a great game, a great catch coming across the middle to, I believe, tie the game or I can't remember, to bring it close. And that was a hell of a game.
He's
the
good.
wide receivers from USC a lot. Like I think Amon-Ra was like maybe a second round pick, maybe or a third round. I can't remember. That guy's going to be a fourth
he was
round.
in the fourth because they showed on TV that he had a notepad of all the receivers that were taken ahead of him. That's motivation for him to do better.
I'm sure there's lots of people like going that. Look at Tom Brady. These guys, you get overlooked, you get a chip on your shoulder, and you play that much harder.
It's funny to me with the NFL. Tom Brady's always the guy that's brought up of, that he was underrated, undervalued. He was in the 6th round. Like, he's always the number one guy. In the NBA, you can count to several, but in the NFL, it's always Tom Brady. He's number one on that. It's funny.
Yeah, he's the classic example. While we're working out technical issues, I've got this question for the chat. If anyone's listening to us right now in the chat, let me know, and Jeffrey can answer this question as well. Is there a noticeable volume difference between me and Tim? I always wondered about that, Tim, whether we can adjust individual volumes on StreamYard.
To me, you guys sound the same.
I did. I actually bumped up when Daryl was saying that he couldn't hear Jeffrey. I actually bumped it up through StreamYard.
Okay.
That's what I did. So if you go like on the bottom,
if
you go click next to the mic, you can adjust mic settings. I usually do when you have a guy coming in, he's like super loud, he's blowing out the place. You could drop it down, but once in a while you'll pop it up a little bit.
You did that with me, Tim, when you said that Austin, his volume was a lot louder than mine on our stream that time. It was insane. When I replayed that, I was like, wow, that was loud. I didn't know it because to me, it didn't sound that bad, but it was coming out a lot louder to you guys. I think I had my computer like on low volume, so I didn't even know that he was that loud.
I wasn't even going. I'm not even going through my mic right now.
I got another call here. Hold on a second.
Wow.
Hello, you're live with Mark and Jeffrey.
Tim, this is Tom from Iowa.
Tom from Iowa. How you doing?
Mark.
Hey, Tom.
Mark, we've been watching the show.
Appreciate
I
it.
need yard, but I called in to help you out tonight.
Thank you.
So
That's awesome.
Hey, Mark, is Corey starting to be as popular as Daryl on your show? Corey Barton.
I always thought Corey was far more popular than me. What's that?
Yeah. Well, Iowa's offense makes Corey popular. He's a bit of a homer, don't you think?
No, he's an Iowa fan.
Me and Iowa's conversation was great that day about the Big
I'm
Ten.
an Iowa fan, but last week you had your Iowa State guest on 2 weeks ago, right?
Yep.
On the Iowa show?
Yeah, Levi.
And he was saying that Iowa State and Iowa was pretty much similar, right?
Yeah, that's not
He
true.
wasn't all wrong. You don't think it's true?
Not historically. Iowa's a much better
that much
program
talent
historically than Iowa State.
You're right. They're much better coached and they have more experience. Talent level, I don't think they're that much better.
Well, you could make an argument there in terms of talent level, but there's no comparison between winning percentage.
Yes. Iowa State is toward the bottom
Right.
of the Power 5 teams historically in winning percentage, toward the bottom, where Iowa's a consistent top 25 team throughout history. But you're all right. The talent's not that much different at all.
No. It's got a lot to do with coaching. You put Kurt Ferentz at Penn State, and he beats James Franklin. He has a better record than James Franklin at Penn State.
Well, that's your opinion, and you might be right, and we will never know. There is something to be said for stability.
Now, Mark,
So let's understand something,
Right.
that Kirk Ferentz is a really good coach, but he is also he's also benefiting from just sheer stability, that he's been there for so long that he's got his processes in place, his coaching staff in place. There's little change on his coaching staff. He went like 7 years with no changes in a coaching staff. That's insane. That never happened.
Alabama
Those guys
can't go
were
7
flipping all over the
months.
place. So if you put any coach in a situation and let them coach, regardless if they went 3-9 every year for a couple of years, just left them alone, most of these guys are good enough that they would raise the level of play to some stability, because you would just benefit from the stability. So he is benefiting from that, but he's an excellent coach. And I'm not saying that you're wrong in any way. I'm just saying we don't know. We don't know if Kirk Ferentz would go to Penn State and recruit at the level that James Franklin is.
That's a great question there.
You're right. You probably wouldn't get a quarterback. You probably wouldn't have an offense.
I would love to see Tom Allen at Alabama just to see how he'd do.
Oh, it would be fascinating if we could move these coaches around.
Put Nick Saban at Indiana and Tom Allen at Alabama. Who would do better? Would Nick Saban make Indiana better, or would Tom Allen make Alabama fall further? I mean, it'd be crazy.
Well, there'd be two experiments there. One would be just the sheer presence of Nick Saban and his ability to coach and coach his coaching staff to raise the level of play for one season. So he doesn't get to recruit. He just has to coach that team, and he gets to work with them the entire offseason. How much better can he make them? But then also Nick Saban gets the job, and he can be there. Let's say it's Nick Saban of 10 years ago, and he gets to coach there for 5 years. And let's see what he can do with the entire program.
I mean, that's a great point, because I was talking with Austin about this like about 5-6 months ago, and I was saying if you put Nick Saban, this was even before Deion got hired. It was a while back. I said if Nick Saban got hired at Colorado and he didn't get to use the portal and he had to try to build that team with those players, he would not win, because those players just were not capable of winning. He would win a couple more games, but they would not get to a bowl game. If Deion Sanders took the job at Colorado, was not able to bring his son, was not able to bring Travis Hunter along, all these transfers, or if they had to sit out a year like the old rules, they would not be winning right now. It's because he was able to bring those players in. Nick Saban would bring more talent to Indiana and Colorado, not the level he's getting at Bama, but you have to be able to get those players. Players are very important, just like the coaches. You can win like Ferentz without as much talent, but you still have to have talent. If you don't, you're not going to win no matter how good of a coach you are.
Now, Urban Meyer walked on campus at 4 consecutive schools, and they were immediately better the next season. And he obviously didn't have the transfer portal. He had to deal with those teams that he was given. He did have a freshman class that he brought in, but those were just freshmen, and we all know that they have the least amount of impact their freshman season. So very limited impact. When he started at Bowling Green, when he started at Utah, Florida, Ohio State, they were all better. So it's a complicated formula. There's no right answer to that.
I mean, I think when you look at like an Urban Meyer or a Nick Saban did not win a title at Michigan State. Urban Meyer did not win a title at Utah, but when they went to Florida and Ohio State, and when Nick Saban went to LSU and Bama, they did. That's the thing. They didn't win a title at those previous schools, but they won more games than most coaches at those schools. If they had stayed, would they have gotten to that level? I'll never know, because they didn't stay.
You might as well say Urban Meyer won a national title at Utah. He went 13-0. That's all he could do.
Well, you know what I mean. Like UCF, with Scott Frost, it's the same thing.
He won a Fiesta Bowl.
I mean, I guess technically,
like just because people, knuckleheads that many don't even know what they're doing, didn't award a national title. Like, the results on the field were, and I'm not saying they were the best team.
Yeah, because if Utah and UCF played the best teams in the country, like in Alabama or Georgia in the SEC, they would not have been undefeated. UCF especially, they would not have been undefeated.
The point I'm making is that if it said Urban Meyer didn't win a national championship at Utah, well, then that means nobody could win a national championship at Utah. He won all of the games that season. That's all he could do.
Well, Utah could,
and it's not the Super Bowl. There's not a tournament that determines who wins the Super Bowl, and it's all done on the field. It's you get awarded by people watching games as to whether you're worthy of winning a championship.
When Urban Meyer was at Utah, they were in the Mountain West,
Sure.
or before that. They were in maybe another conference before that, maybe the WAC, can't remember, whatever it was. But they're in the Power 5 now, Power 4 after this season. So I mean, they would have a better chance to do it if a coach like that was there. I mean, you saw TCU, they made the playoff, even though they weren't clearly as good, because they had good coaching and good players. They got shellacked against Georgia. But I don't know. I mean, it's a great point. Coaches do elevate programs, though. I mean, if you're a great coach, you can make a bad program better. But can you make them win a title, or can you make them win consistently against the best teams? That's when it becomes a lot more complicated, because most don't even stay at those programs long enough to find out.
Tim, are you still on?
Yeah, I am. Sorry, I'm just playing around with the
Tim still
call
there?
queue. Yeah, can you hear me?
Well, see, when I call on the phone, I don't have my website, so I don't know who's still on here. Tim, Sunday night, you guys talked about, I think it was Sunday night, you talked about the difference in plays, right? You had a heated conversation. Was it on Sunday night? On the time clock, the time, by the clock being shortened, or the play calling. You understand where I mean, there's no clock stoppage with first downs.
Right.
Do you remember that conversation?
Vaguely. after dark stuff?
Yeah. And so we got Mark on here tonight. But typically, if you have less plays, whether it's 5, it is not that it's that significant, but it's going to help the less talented teams, the less offensive teams.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's coming back to me now. Yeah.
Because there's less plays. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I don't want to get in as long as conversation as you guys did that night, but
well, so just really quickly.
So take Iowa for example. Their whole deal is about less plays of the game and defense, and if Ohio State or USC has 7 less plays, it adds to their game. I'm not saying they're going to win, but it helps their game plan.
Especially if you're in the lead like Texas was against Alabama, it helped them run the clock out easier.
That's a different story, though. That's a different story. What the conversation, correct me if I'm wrong, but the discussion was that it favored just the rule, just blanketly favored teams. It hurt. Actually, the conversation it hurt quick scoring teams, high powered quick scoring teams like a USC or like a Washington. Correct? That was a conversation where it would aid.
Yeah.
So here's my thing on that. It really comes down to how efficient your offense is. It doesn't matter if you have 6 attempts or if you have 3 attempts or if you have 25 attempts. It's going to come down to how efficient can you score? What is your scoring expectancy on any one drive? I think that's going to help you. If you shorten the game, here's what I said. I think that for teams, for instance, like USC, where it would hurt, especially USC last year. Think to the game that USC played up in Salt Lake. It's going to hurt teams like that because teams are going to get tired. If you're a thin defense, it helps you there, right? But if you have depth, it's not going to hurt you as much. I just don't see why shortening a game is going to help as someone with a worse offense. So you get less. So both teams get right. So both teams will get less possessions. How again is that going to help the team?
You're right, but
yeah, if you're a strict
US has 2 interceptions, in a game, they get 1 less possession. Do you see what I'm saying?
I think it benefits the team that's in the lead no matter what, because like again, Texas Bama. I know that's not the same thing, but Texas was able to run the clock out easier. If you so happen to be like Indiana and you're playing Louisville today, and Indiana's up by 10, and you're trying to hold on to that lead, and maybe Louisville is a better team on offense, but Indiana was able to get a couple turnovers and they're in the lead. Then it benefits them if Indiana can run the clock out because it's going to run it out quicker.
Yeah, no, I mean, what it does also, it hurts if you go down at halftime. Like, there's been a lot of games you see where a team comes back at half, they're down 17 points, right? Coming back for that 78-point deficit, it's going to hurt those teams where you need to stretch the game out in order to come back and win. I was just having a hard time logically looking. I get it. I mean, I sort of see an argument, but I don't fully see how it's going to change. I mean, so instead of having like 8 possessions the second half, you have like 6. How's that going to change? It really comes down to, can your defense stop them?
Mm-hmm.
Because the quick strike team is still going to be able to have the ability to overcome that play deficit and that time deficit. When you're scoring like USC, you're covering 75 yards in 3 or 4 plays versus an offense like Iowa that's got to go 12 plays for 75 yards. You can also make the argument that the Iowa offense is going to be hurt greater than the USC offense by that restricted time. But it makes total sense that the longer you play, the more plays you play, the better team is going to win. If you only played one game, if you only played one play every game, who knows who would win the game? So obviously, the less number of plays that you play, the more chance that an underdog has to win. It's just like basketball. Back in the days before the shot clock, if you squeezed down a game and you played possessions out, the worst basketball teams would keep possession of the ball and limit the scoring and limit the game down. Same thing in football.
I was just going to say, I loved in the old NCAA football games, how you would have, like, at the end when you'd win, and, like, if you're the underdog, the guy would always say on the commentary on the video game, he'd be like, if that game had lasted a couple more minutes, I think that other team would have won. It just, yes, of course, because I was almost going to lose. I mean, of course. It would crack me up. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I don't think it's going to be significant, but it will in a couple games.
I think that in the extreme cases of it, where I can see, like Mark gave you an extreme case of it. If you get down to one play, maybe one drive, maybe 2 drives, then maybe it could affect the game. But it's never going to be a game, even with these new rules, where you're not going to have tons of possessions to make it the better team's going to score more. It's going to change games. It might have gone different ways, but I don't see it giving an advantage to one style. It might give advantages to, like, maybe you get a couple of bad breaks in the second half, and also you find yourself down. Well, you're not going to have all those opportunities to come back. I get that point of it, but I mean, it's cutting drives for both teams, and how you win this game is by scoring more points than the other team. So if you're limiting possessions, it's limiting possessions for both teams.
The most excessive examples I can think of would be the service academies. Like, I can think of a game that Army played against Ohio State where they kept the ball for the entire third quarter. For 15 minutes, they had the ball. They drove 99 yards. Now, that's the only score they had the entire game, and they lost 38-7. But Army was able to keep the ball away from Ohio State for an entire quarter. Well, because they're running the ball all the time, this is going to perpetuate that style of play. And probably that is, at least off the top of my head, the maximum effectiveness that I can see, or most egregious example of taking advantage of that rule change.
Yeah, that's what Tom Allen was trying to do with Ohio State, even though going for it on 4th and 2 was the exact opposite of that. But yeah, that they were doing the same thing, just keeping it close, low scoring, make it not look too bad.
Mark, have you seen any stats or comparisons on it from the first 2 weeks last year to this 2 weeks?
No, that was the first thing I was going to just say here.
Or anything?
I saw a projection that some service had put together based on previous games, whether it was last season or a number of seasons, that the average game number of plays run by the offense on each side was supposed to be reduced from 68 to 63. It was supposed to take 5 plays away from each team on average, but I've not seen anything over the first 2 weeks of the season.
Well, Iowa's plays were down, I think. Weren't they just 51 plays, I think? I haven't looked at anybody else's, but they were odd. You can't use them for a gauge.
Iowa's been doing the same thing for 15 years.
Well, so everybody's down on Kurt Ferentz, and they all think he's going to get fired if he don't have 26 points.
No, that's more Brian
You
Ferentz.
mean Brian?
Right?
You mean Brian?
Yeah, Brian
Okay.
gets 70. Brian gets a $75,000 bonus if they score 26 points. So
That
my
doesn't mean he's going to get fired, though, if he doesn't
everything
achieve it.
not to score. No, he's not going to get fired because Kurt will somehow pull out 10-2, and you're not going to fire your son.
Utah
And,
State did not look good tonight, and I was struggling.
Kurt can bump. Well, Iowa's plan is to look ugly. You know, they don't want to look good.
Then they are reaching their goal.
Kurt can supplement Brian's 75,000. You know.
I think
So,
the goal is
I
to
don't
try to look as good as
offensive
possible. I don't
coordinator.
know why that's the goal. I've never understood that. I mean, a win is a win, and Kirk's right, and other coaches have said a win is a win no matter how ugly it is, but you should want to look good. You know, you should want to impress and everything. I don't know. I mean, Iowa is always going to win with Kirk Ferentz, you know, but they're never going to be a title contender under Kirk Ferentz. Not that most years they would be anyway, but the way that they're built. Just like with USC, it's the same thing. If their defense doesn't get better, they're not going to be a title contender. To be able to win the whole thing, they're better than Iowa because of the offense, but you have to be good on both sides of the ball.
Yep.
Hey, really quickly, thanks to Traveling Fools going crazy again, gifting memberships. Thank you again, Traveling Fools, for doing that.
Wow.
Roger, did you pick one up? Is that what that is for Thanks Fools? I'm not sure, but as always, Traveling Fools, thank you so much for being so generous with your time and your money.
Yes, thank you. TF. Appreciate that. That's so nice of you.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I'll let you go. I just was calling in.
Yeah,
So
no,
we'll talk to you tomorrow.
Thank you so
Appreciate it.
much for the call. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Tim, do we have a way to track who's received these memberships?
I don't know. I just saw one. It's the crazy thing. What's terrible about StreamYard is it doesn't allow. So like it says, if you look in the chat, it says, you know, sorry, you can't see it because if you're looking through StreamYard, but if you go, I'm looking at both. The reason I know that Traveling Fools gifted a membership is that it's in that chat. We had this problem on the USC channel where people were gifting, and it doesn't show up in StreamYard, but it will show up in your regular chat. So because I have to do that because if I type in here, if I type in their mark, it'll say Voice of College Football. So I have this one open in case I need to chat with anybody in the chat. But yeah, the reason I knew it is because a big green banner saying gifted one Voice of College Football membership.
Oh, there it is. Yes. But we can't put that on the screen because it's not in StreamYard.
Yeah, it doesn't pop up. Yeah, that's why I just try to call it out verbally because.
Thank you, TF. We appreciate you. Thank you so much for that. You're awesome.
The technicalities of technology.
And do want to remind everyone that we've got, YouTube memberships and we got Patreon memberships, and we're doing it in such a way that it doesn't matter what you subscribe to. So I don't want to penalize anyone in any such way. And I know that can be kind of confusing, but we had Patreon 3 or 4 years ago. I didn't want to shut that down. And then YouTube comes up with memberships. I wanted to take advantage of that. So we are doing everything possible to make sure that all of the benefits are exactly the same on both. So for example, I'm going to leave here and I'm going to do my predictions for tomorrow. They're going to be on Patreon, but I'm also going to be sending a post to all the YouTube members that only the YouTube members can see with all my predictions. And they've got the Discord link. And so if you're not getting the predictions or the Discord link for whatever reason, I am sending those out to the YouTube members. So just let me know. We want everyone to be accessible to all the benefits.
Park is the hardest working guy ever. I mean, after this, you're going to be doing that. Like, I remember when that one time you're like, should I do the top 25? It actually makes sense before I go to bed or after I wake up? Nah, after I wake up. So I'll be ready to go. That was funny.
We're up to 19 postgame shows. So we did get somebody. We get Best Damn Media to do our Ohio State postgame shows. So in dealing with all these different post games, I got to tell some of these people when they call in and say, I need a StreamYard link for this, and I need a code, and I need to work out this problem. Or remember our conversation about this? And I'll be like, you know what? you're going to have to remind me because I have no idea who I've talked to. I've got like 50 people doing like 30 different shows. So I can't keep track of it all, but that's a good thing. That is a good thing. I've got a lot of great people helping me, and Tim is right there at the top of the list. What Tim and Tony in particular, Rick as well. We got Matt Zemek on the USC channel doing our USC show and providing that analysis, and he jumps on the post game as well. That USC channel, boy, if I could replicate that 15 times, then we would be in great shape.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for letting us use your channel. We have a great time over there. Oh boy, do we.
And now we've got Tim on the Monday night show with myself and Matt Zemek. And so that's a good time and going to be an even better time going forward. So we invite everyone to check out our USC show on Monday nights.
We get this call queue working out. I think these chats will get popping. Nobody's calling in though.
I think that's why the StreamYard though, it was limiting because like only the same few people call in, and like when you had to call in, like because I remember when there was people I haven't even heard in a long time since you've lost that ability there. There were so many other people.
When we had the call-in line, I had to end every show and tell people no more calls. Sorry, no calls. We had to end it. Now it depends on the night, but there are many times where I'm like, oh, we get a lot of people on here.
Yeah, you didn't see my comment, or maybe you did, and you just ignored it. But last night I wrote in there when you were like, calling everybody, if anyone want to talk, and you're just sitting there just talking about what you were talking about last night. And I wrote in chat and I said, you need a caller, Mark, and I already talked to you. I was just kidding. I wouldn't have done that, but I just thought it was funny that you're like, you need someone to call in. I'm like, I'm still here even though I called in already. It's funny though.
The one call per show rule.
Yes. Except for the Big Ten live show when you got you, and then you can call back in to the Ocho part with One Scoop John.
Yes. John's got a free for all.
Or would I lurk in the background, Mark, and I hear someone attacking me and I pop back in?
I did that one time though. Actually, one time you let me back on again when Corey though was on though that day, and he was talking about. He's like, remember what Jeffrey said, and then I came back. I was like, no, wait a minute, I got to defend my honor here about Nebraska. Come on, what are we talking about? That conversation went for 2 hours on the 24-hour stream. Only on the 24-hour stream would that have been okay?
Yes, that did go on and on forever. Yes, it did.
I wasn't trying to drag it out. it was hilarious though.
Oh, it was fun. It was fun, and I was going to be on anyway. So,
are there any decent 9 a.m. 12 p.m. Eastern time?
Indiana.
Are there any good? No, I'm just kidding, Jeffrey. I'm just kidding.
LSU, Mississippi State. There's one
State.
for you. Penn State, Illinois. Those are probably the two best. And then again, Jeffrey's going to say Louisville, Indiana. I think those are maybe Kansas State, Missouri play at noon.
That one could be interesting. Missouri looked bad against Middle Tennessee State the last week. Maybe looking ahead, I don't know. And then Florida State, BC. Jeff Halfley, got to keep it within 4 scores if you can.
I'll say, are those lines within 2 touchdowns except for that Indiana game?
It's within
LSU,
10.
Mississippi State.
Louisville, Indiana's 10.
That's within. I'm sorry, Jeffrey. What was that?
LSU, Mississippi State.
What's the line on that? Really?
9.
LSU is not. Wow.
I think that's a little high.
K-State, Missouri's 5. It's only a 5-point favorite for K-State.
Well, did Mississippi State struggle with Arizona?
Yes,
They
overtime.
did.
Was that at home? Was that in Oxford?
At home.
I mean, Oxford.
Yep.
Was that in
Starkville?
Starkville.
Yeah.
Starkville?
Hail State.
Stark Vegas. Yes.
Okay.
It was. Yeah. Certainly LSU could cover that line, but I think I'm going Mississippi State, which reminds me, I got to get off here. 145, 153. Yes.
If Mark, I know he's not doing Louisville, Indiana, but got to pick Indiana with the points.
Okay. All right. Mark. Appreciate everybody being here. I'm going to be on all sorts of times Saturday with instant analysis, and we've got 18 post games, and we also have the call-in show at this time Saturday night. So, folks, make it on back on Saturday, and meanwhile, subscribe, and we will see you soon. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Jeffrey.
Thanks
for having me on.